I'm all by myself. There's no one here.
Breaking.
Look at that.
Suspected Libertarian Party member has discovered King Pill. Quote, that's right, friends. We've made the mainstream. Help! I started listening to that Matt King Pill guy and still cannot figure out what the actual fuck King Pill, air quotes, is supposed to even mean. Perhaps it is somewhere in his droning monologues that I am just too stupid to see. Safe bet. But can someone please explain in less words than 10 million words? Oh, that's right, fans. We've gone to the mainstream now. Libertarian Mises Caucus, alleged person, Caroline Anharlos, has posed this question. Well, Karen, I think that you may have hit the nail right on the head. The answer is, in fact, in the long droning monologues that you yourself purport to be too stupid to understand. We'll actually, I think we can actually say what, maybe at the end of the show, it'll be like a little teaser.
My favorite thing about all of that is that there was no viewers the whole time you were doing it.
Okay, that's good. I tried to be.
So everyone will just get it when they watch it later.
I tried to, yeah. Okay, that's fun.
That was even better than your Jordan Peterson. That was even better than your Jordan Peterson, and your Jordan Peterson was really, really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as a tease, I don't know who this person is, but there's a profile frame involved, so that usually counts me out.
Yeah.
Just off the bat. But anyway, I think at the end we'll give I'll give a concise, just a little synopsis of what it means to be King Pill. I think I've worked it out. So it's a fair question. I don't know. The long droning monologues certainly are not for everyone. I mean, also, I don't know. Am I supposed to understand those too? Like, I don't understand a lot of them. I don't understand a lot of what are you only supposed to listen to things that you understand? That would be uninteresting. I don't know.
My favorite, I'm not, I don't really care about like getting into a flame war or anything, but I'll just say that I don't understand the mentality of someone who posts something super aggro and like condescending or insulting or whatever.
Yeah.
And the subject of their post is, I don't understand this thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if they're coming from the position of, I don't understand this thing.
Yeah.
Then I can imagine coming at it from a lot of different perspectives, but coming at it from the perspective of very aggro, I think it's just kind of a, I don't know. So people are very fascinating. People interest me. They fascinate me endlessly.
Yeah, you're a curious guy.
I am very.
I if I may say, just kind of like looking at you while you set everything up, I could imagine coming at you from a variety of angles. I don't know. The hair's like
last week it was the bukkake of dopamine, and today you're coming at me from a whole bunch of angles.
Call me dopamine, buddy. A lot of people would say that about me when they meet me. It's like, oh man, he's like the human representation of dopamine.
Yeah, I bet that's definitely the vibe I get from you.
Yeah, my nickname, a lot of my friends call me Kid Dopamine.
Because it's nothing but dopamine whenever they're around you.
That's right. That's right.
All right, I think that the stream is good to go. It looks like everything's working on YouTube. Mm-hmm. It looks like everything's working on Facebook, even though nobody pays attention to Facebook. If you're watching this on Facebook, I appreciate you, but
yeah, it's weird.
You should come to YouTube because YouTube is we prefer YouTube because it's a platform of tolerance where you can have open and free discussions about
unlike Facebook,
about anything, like your competition to see which happens first, whether you get kicked off the platform or you get 1,000 subscribers. Those kinds of free and open discussions. Mm-hmm. That's what YouTube is the best for, and that's why we're on YouTube. So
Yeah, it's like
I don't pay attention to anything on Facebook, so sorry to you guys who are watching on there.
But he will still stream there, which I think is interesting. I don't like. It's like
there's a very one-sided relationship. You watch me, and I'm not going to.
It's like sort of, yeah. It's like meta hipster. It's like post hipster. It's weird. But the people who are also watching it, it's like there's like this empty bar across the street from like sort of a bootleg TGI Fridays where they let the employees drink or encourage the employees to drink. And, you know, I'm trying to think of a metaphor for the chat because the chat's fun.
Yeah, the chat is great.
That's more fun than the show.
I never expected to wind up with a chat with people like this. It's been great. I've been very, very surprised at how everything has worked out.
Yeah, it's all working out. That's what I think. That's what the past couple years in our time doing the show. That's been a theme. Everything's working out.
That's right. Yeah.
You want to just like take like a hard pivot into hope.
Into hope?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Just like we just talked about how great everything's going to be.
Oh, yeah. All of a sudden it's the white pill show.
Yeah, all the negative Nancys.
Yeah.
You know.
What did I had a great white pill tweet today. What did I say? I said no, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. And I said a lot of things today. This one here. I said first they'll use private vaccine mandates to make you unemployable. Then they'll make welfare, unemployment, and stimulus checks contingent upon vaccination status. They'll keep breaking your windows until you accept their protection services. All must submit to the regime.
Hell yeah.
That is the kind of white pill that we drop here.
It's so hot. It's such
King
a hot thing. I'm just like a fan now.
You're a fan of your own show?
Of the regime. They're so good at stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
so awesome.
Looking at Reason and Cato, apparently the way that libertarians are supposed to behave is by drowning the boots of the regime in saliva. That seems to be the libertarian mode of the day. I have to apologize to you guys in advance. I've got an absolutely splitting headache today, but I have accumulated as many substances as I can possibly possibly reasonably for the sake of my health, accumulate in one body. And because I've done that, then I will press on and I'll make your. Oh, this is the thing I was thinking of right here. MSNBC headline: Libertarians aren't buying the freedom to be unvaccinated argument. And then Reason also said that they're talking about Rand Paul getting booted off of this platform that we fully endorsed that move. YouTube clearly had to boot Rand Paul off. That was a very, very wise move for them to make, and we endorse everything that YouTube does. But Reason said that even though he shouldn't have been kicked off, this is the very nuanced position of Reason magazine. This is their spreading liberty position. It is, even though YouTube shouldn't have removed Rand Paul, the real concern is that his criticism of cloth masks was too severe. He shouldn't have been as severe in his criticism, even though they shouldn't have kicked him off anyways. That's the angle that they decided to take, because they're very clearly worried about the most important subjects.
I'm so glad that that we started this show like so long ago and
got ourselves on the record when we did.
Yeah. I'm not stoked about being like right about things in particular, but it is kind of interesting, you know.
It's a burden to bear, man. Like being right about everything, that's not all like lollipops and marshmallows, man. You gotta carry that around like a boulder on your back. Dying
to be wrong. It's also kind of interesting to just watch all of the I don't even know how I'd say it, but you know, it just you're watching libertarianism. You know, there's a lot of people who are mad because like they believe like in like a better version of libertarianism, but it's kind of fun watching them watch people's understanding of libertarianism get totally molested by like Reason and Cato.
Yeah.
Yeah, like just like it was like libertarian in a headline. What? What? It's got to be so great. It reminds me of my friend, the leftist, who's like convinced that leftism doesn't exist anymore because it got totally co-opted. And I guess that's everything, though.
Yeah,
it all gets.
That's what happens. Everything is co-opted. Mm-hmm. But I love the people that see this. They're like that dynamic you just said, where it's like, ooh, libertarian in a headline.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Like that reaction. Yeah. And then the next reaction, the one that comes right after that, is we need more headlines with libertarian in it. That's the problem. We need to get ourselves in more headlines. That will make things better because it'll be different when we put ourselves in the headlines. It's going to be different.
Anyways, I have a question for the fans.
Do it.
Are any of the fans anywhere like someplace that it doesn't suck to be right now? Because like where I am is like just like a week away from just really sucking again. I mean, it kind of sucks currently, but we are headed back to Suckville real hard. So, I have a hard time. Although I like no one is more convinced that this stuff is going to be sort of everywhere, and that life is going to suck much more than it does right now, pretty much everywhere. But is there anyone who's in some state in the middle of the country where their day-to-day experience is just like, things are kind of normal. Over the summer it was a little weird, but now my life's pretty normal, I guess. I don't know. You see, some people who are talking about vaccines and masks and stuff like that. But other than that, I would say, things are pretty much how they always been in good old insert name of city or state. And what is your radius to the nearest craft brewery? Because I view that as the harbinger of, I did not sleep a whole lot, by the way. That's like sort of the harbinger of like impending, fuckery. So that's my question for the chat, because your boy's got to go somewhere.
All I could hear the whole time you were asking that question, you're like, is there anywhere where it's just been kind of normal and things haven't really locked down and everyone's just basically kind of like usual and it doesn't seem like things are going to get worse anytime soon? And all I could hear the whole time was, Tho Bishop enters the chat.
Yeah.
Just waiting for Tho to pop up.
Yeah. Well, I moved here from Florida, and Florida is a strange mistress. You know what I mean? You just don't know with that place. I know that there's a lot of people who are like Team Florida, I can't imagine that they're just gonna let this guy kind of do his thing indefinitely. I just can't see it. I don't know. Maybe I'm like beaten and broken and completely demoralized and it worked, but I don't see how that happens. I don't know.
I've been in the same boat.
I like how, like how. I don't see it. I'm sorry. Maybe Tho or Andrew could explain why, but I can't see it.
It's like as you think of like each cause has a new effect, and so as you kind of reason through the cause and effect, it's like from this point here, he basically either has like a very narrow range of options. He can keep doubling down and keep raising the ante and keep leveling up more and more and more and making it more and more antagonistic on basically a trend straight toward secession. So he basically either has to be hell-bent on becoming the king of Florida, or he has to give in some way or another, whether it's him getting taken out, whether it's his family getting taken out and him being brought to his knees, whether like the stakes are too high for him to just be allowed to do his thing. My bet is that the guy's not a true believer. He's not like not the type that's like going to come home on his shield, like he doesn't strike me as that type. So my expectation is that he's going to ultimately take a deal of some kind, and he's going to be able to talk a big game, but he's going to be compromised in some way. It's not anything against him. I don't see him being the guy. I don't see him being the guy who is going to take the entire full force of the regime head on, because that's not what he's doing right now. He's not getting both barrels. He's not even getting one full barrel right now. He's getting heavy criticism. He's not actually getting pressure from the regime to change. Like right now, he's being kind of kept as like a what do you call it? The foil, kind of like they get to keep him as a boogeyman, as an opposition. They need that opposition to kind of establish themselves and work against him. But the time's going to come when they're like, okay, enough. You're not useful to us anymore, and you need to go. And I don't foresee the path of cause and effect that leads to him actually like putting down roots and making himself immovable in the way that he would need to actually survive that. So yeah, I mean, I guess we need Andrew or Tho to come in and give us the details on why they think that DeSantis has the goods.
Well, while we're here, Texas has entered the chat. So can you give us a long droning monologue that we can't understand about Texas? Your thoughts on Texas?
Yeah. My thoughts on Texas. I'm hoping to make it out there in a couple of months to check it out. I went to Dallas a couple of times when I was in high school, I think, and I don't really remember very much of it. I remember, I don't remember,
brother.
I don't remember being put off from it. So there's that. But for me, my thinking on the political front is that Texas is going to be like the battleground. It's going to be the full focus because they've established themselves with the reputation that they have, and because being a Texan is it's like a spiritual thing. There's a lot of people there who are really ready to go at it. So my expectation is that that's going to be where the regime is really primarily focused. And perhaps maybe as I'm talking through this, maybe this is what the angle is for DeSantis, is that, everyone's going to be focused on Texas and he kind of slips under the radar. I don't really buy that, but that's a possibility. But my expectation is that Texas is going to be an outright battleground. And I just don't have any idea I don't have any desire to be in a battleground. I don't want to be there. I want to find the place that is like that, but not the actual battleground, not the actual front lines. Maybe in another life, maybe if I was single, maybe if some things were different, I'd be interested in being on the front lines, but I'm just not. So for me, Texas is kind of, I would really need to see some things change in Texas before I really put it ahead of I don't know, maybe like Wyoming or Idaho, Montana. Some of those areas I'm a little more open to. Then you get the weather issue, snow and all that, and going from Southern California to Wyoming would be a real change. But I guess if Kanye did it, anyone can, right?
Did he do that?
Yeah.
He has
Wyoming? He has like a whole compound. I mean, right now, apparently while he's like finishing up this new album, he's living in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, where like the Falcons and Atlanta United play. He's like living in the stadium. Apparently, there's something very strange, but yeah. So he completely relocated from Calabasas to Wyoming, and he has a whole like compound with thousands, millions, maybe of acres, and he's got his whole thing going.
I thought you said California. My bad. Yeah, it's the purgatory that gets me. It's like the not knowing, the anticipating, just the indefinite. Fuck, it's just, can we just, like, I understand that I am utterly ill-suited for all the places that seem reasonable for me to go. But like the peace of mind of just like, yeah, I'm fucking Kansas Stevie Boy now. I'm one Kansas motherfucker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
It'd
don't know
be
how to
nice
do
to
any,
be settled somewhere and to like
I don't know
have
how to
a
do Kansas shit, but you know, like you know, I get with the fucking program. You know, I've been
you
in
learn how
some
to be a
rural.
farmer.
No, no, not like not that, not where you need to fucking do because I'm just it's too late for me for that. But
You'd be there to service the farmer, huh?
yeah, exactly. It's just like, look, I get it. It's like, you know, you guys were right. I was wrong. You know, I should have gone. I was always, you know, had whatever political sensibilities or moral sensibilities that kind of align with, you know, rural people and things like that. But, you know, culturally and everything else, you know, it was much more metropolitan or city or just, you know, like it just didn't jive. And I should have not tried to straddle the line. I should have run full speed into rural, and I didn't. And it was my fault. You guys were right. MAGA. I don't know what to tell you. But you win, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it. And I would accept my lowly position in the middle of the country, just trying to have an honest living, you know, but not even really a living, but just to not have to deal with the stuff that I wouldn't even like sort of get into, just but how just annoying it is here. It's like I feel like I am in like a headquarters for you know, this terrible shit.
It's yeah. At this point, everyone. There's lots of people talk about like how cringy or whatever the MAGA, the hardcore like Midwest MAGA types can be, but I would very much rather be around them. I'd rather deal with their cringiness or their idiosyncrasies than the whatever the crowd is. I don't even know what to call them anymore. Woke, progressive, SJW, whatever. The foot soldiers of the regime. The mainline progressive Protestant cult. I just don't want to be around people like that. I don't want to be near them. I don't want to be associated with them. I don't want my son growing up associated with them. My son is the largest 10-month-old child you've ever seen. And in Southern California, any kid over a baby over 2 has to wear a mask. And my son is never wearing a mask. That's not happening. I'm not putting a mask on him. So we're going to get out of here before that has to happen. But I just the that clip that you sent me was really interesting. I need to listen to it a couple of times. The excerpt from the book Imperium, talking about liberalism.
Oh
Oh,
man.
that
Has
was.
anyone read that book? Is anyone in the chat who's read Imperium or even has like a grasp or like a summary?
Don't admit
Um,
it. Don't admit
yeah,
it. The
yeah, don't
NSA
admit
is
it.
watching.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is. I gotta say, it is kind of weird that like, you know, for the obscure things that I'll stumble across and just say, oh, golly, that's interesting. You know, just sort of what a Google search about it will oftentimes turn up. You know, it's becoming a pattern. I'll say that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, one of those.
Yeah, like, damn it. Talk about sharing interests, you know, with people.
Right. What does Carlos say? Aligning interests.
Mhm.
We're discovering our aligning interests.
Mhm.
All
And
right.
if you'd
Well,
like to discover a fourth dimension, I'll tell you what you can do. You can go over to the website of our friends Carlos and Vanessa Abelar at palomaverdecbd.com, and you can peruse their various injectables. I believe they have some edibles, gummies, all variety. You got muscle aches. You know, they've got things you can rub all over your milky white thighs. They've got things you can put into shadow so that people can't see what they are, like Matthew was doing just then. What was that? Because it's just like a black container for a second.
yeah, it was their gummies.
They're
It's the
gummies. Oh,
strawberry lemonade
Lord.
gummies. I just
Strawberry
ate one,
lemonade.
and actually my headache is actually starting to subside a little bit. So
Ooh.
so Vicodin barely touched it.
Mm-hmm.
Naproxen barely touched it. Weed barely touched it. But CBD, that is actually doing something. Probably CBD and a caffeine are kind of working together for it.
Ooh, there
But
you go.
so that should be a pretty good endorsement. If you get headaches,
Yeah.
try some of their CBD. It's fantastic. You can get the gummies, you can get their capsules, you can get the muscle rubs, you can get the tincture. We've been using the tincture for Eastwood. And he loves it. He loves the way it tastes. It's a little like minty. But yeah, so it's fantastic companies. We love them a lot. And did you say the promo code King?
Well, yeah, if you are one
off.
of these, people with borderline personality disorder who feels the need to make up ailments such as migraines, yeah, head over there and in the placebo effect alone of the CBD gummies, it's really the deliciousness of strawberry lemonade. Anything.
That's right.
But it will cure your fake, made-up headache that you feel.
That's right. It will
to present yourself as having for whoever didn't hold you at whatever time they were supposed to hold you.
It's not a headache; it's embedded trauma.
Nicholas I'm not says told that migraines are real. Still, I know this is like an old bit. I just migraines, moon landing, it's the same for me.
We know what's interesting is Amy gets migraines, but she gets they're called oral migraines, and it's not oral, not that kind of oral. It's AURAL.
Yeah.
And what it does is it basically just shuts down her vision in one eye. She can't, she just can't see, and she everything gets all her hearing gets all weird and everything.
But there's no pain.
It's typically there's no pain or anything with it, which is very weird.
Yeah.
Shut up, John Hartman. You're trying to bring in false promo codes. That promo code does not belong in this chat section. What's up, John? I was looking for one here. Oh, Nicholas. He said, I've not read it and have no idea what it's about. I of everybody in the chat, if I had to pick out one person that I would expect had read it, it would be Nicholas.
Nice.
Another one would be David Godomsky. Which shout out David. He and I had a little disagreement on Twitter, and then we resolved it amicably. Turned out we were just talking past each other. But here I found the reason
on Twitter. Headline. That's weird. That doesn't happen.
No, never. Very very uncommon. I found the reason headline I was looking for. It was so Rand Paul has his channel suspended on YouTube for posting something about cloth masks. So YouTube is suspending the communications platforms of sitting congressmen. I mean, I guess after they banned the sitting president, but I mean, even now, this is a different thing even than banning the ostensibly outgoing president who the entire world despises. That was one thing, but obviously that's just another step in a direction. And this is to me, this is an escalation even beyond that. You're taking a sitting U.S. senator in good standing. It's not like he's under investigation or anything like that. He's in good standing, and he posted something. He's even a doctor. I mean, he's not technically he's a doctor. Yes, he is a doctor. Technically, he does have training in the medical field, and he posts something and it gets suspended. So Reason, this bastion of libertarian excellence, and I'm not saying that sarcastically. This is what libertarianism is in practice. Whether or not YouTube should have suspended Rand Paul, his criticism of cloth masks was stronger than the evidence justifies. That's the big problem here. The big problem was that his criticism was stronger than the evidence justifies. I mean, that even by itself, even without anything else, that's not a headline. This guy exaggerated a little bit. This guy is making his point a little too strongly. That's not a headline. But of all times, to have that headline with this subject, this is libertarian. You can complain. You can say, well, I don't want libertarianism to be that. I'm libertarian, and we're going to change that. We're going to change libertarianism in the popular eye. No, you're not. No, you're not. Because this is the way the narrative is crafted. This is when you make libertarians more popular. You wouldn't have gotten this headline prior to the Ron Paul revolution. You wouldn't have gotten people associating libertarianism with this prior to the Ron Paul Revolution. Thanks to the Ron Paul Revolution, you get headlines like this that are seen widely. Everyone's, oh, this is what libertarians stand for. And now you have all of that to overcome. All of that to, like, you just have that extra baggage associated with you now. Anyways, so we've gone half an hour into this now, so we might as well get to what the subject of the title is. For anybody who's like encountering our channel for the first time and they're like, they search Moldbug and they see this and they're like, yes, because I like Moldbug and Sam Altman. There isn't a whole lot of search results for that. So they're going to encounter this for the first time and 30 minutes. Like if they make it 30 minutes in, I will be super, super impressed. I really appreciate you. If this is the first time you've ever watched this and you got 30 minutes in just listening to us bullshit about stuff before we actually get into the subject.
That doesn't really do it, does it? Like sort of like a Puerto Rican Tim Pool, but not really.
Isn't Tim Pool Puerto Rican or what is he?
Well,
I thought he's Hispanic in some sense.
A more Puerto Rican Tim Pool. He called himself biracial at some point, and I'm just like, it seems like you're really trying to, force that. I think. Well, does this do it? I gotta work on it. I'm sorry, fans.
A little too tall. You're not gonna repeat it. You're not gonna do it again. Oh, he's Korean.
No,
that's right.
Korean.
It's the same thing. It's basically the same.
Wait. You're telling me he tried to sneak into biracial on like the eight? No. No, that's not how that. Timothy. You certainly know that's not how that works.
Yeah.
No.
You know the rules, Timothy.
No, Timothy.
Okay. All right. So are you gonna stick around for some of the reading here, or are you peacing out?
What time is it? Oh, I could do about 30. Does that work?
That works. That indeed does work.
My screen went black. I thought you ended the fucking stream, and I was just like, man, this guy is taking it to another level. God, that would have been the funniest fucking thing. All right, let's get into the Mencius Moldbug.
Click.
Also, I just want to say, listening to that fucker talk on Michael Malice's show, it made me, and not to, I don't want to gloat, but it made me reappreciate all over again our wine fueled lunch in that restaurant in DC. It was
you and your good buddy, and your good buddy Kurt.
Kurt, what a fucking rip-roaring good time that was. Oh God! I tell you what, maybe one of these days, if we ever have Kurt on, depending on like how much we're able to sort of talk, what sort of topics we're able to get into, in the supporting listeners group, I may be able to share some really fucking funny shit that we talked about. But I can't, not. It's certainly not for here. It would be supporting listener group material, and certainly only with his blessing. Yeah.
Well.
But
I would wager that sooner or later here we will in fact get that blessing.
Oh,
that would be my guess.
I hope so. I hope so.
All right. So the one we're reading today is, as you can see, if you're looking at the screen or if you read the title, is Sam Altman is not a blithering idiot. This was, I would have to say that reading this piece was one of the first times, it was one of my first big red pills on capitalism and the free market. This is one of the first times I started questioning it. So you guys should enjoy this one. This should be a little spicy especially for people who haven't read it before and who aren't totally familiar with Moldbug's position on economics. This is where he really lays out kind of the philosophical background on his economical positions. Before we get into that, real quick, I'll say this: like the stream, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. We're almost there. We're at like 970. We need like 30 more. And then we'll open up the supporting listeners group to anybody else. I'll also say that yesterday I had an interview with Michael Corbell. He's got a podcast called The Invictus Mind. You should go subscribe to it. He said the interview will be out this weekend. We had a really, really interesting conversation. We got into some deep stuff regarding philosophy and religion. And as I was talking, I kind of thought some stuff out loud over the course of the interview. It was pretty cool. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. He's a great guy. I've known him for a while through Jason's private group, and I've been friends with him and his brother on Facebook for a long time. They're both really, really good guys, really smart and an insightful dudes. So go check out the podcast, The Invictus Mind, and look out for that interview to drop. And yeah, I think that was all. Shout out Popular Liberty, showed up in the chat. Good to see you here, buddy.
Claiming, by the way, I think it is hilarious. I'm going to single-handedly save Texas.
Well, if anybody could do it, I would put my money on Populibs. I also have to shout out the Tower Power Hour podcast. They had Shoe on Head last night, and I've only watched about the first half of it. I was able to get through that much last night before I was pulled away, but it was a very, very funny first half. And the thing that I've known who Shoe on Head is for a really long time, like coming up through Twitter and being on Twitter all through the 2010s, and watching those communities clash was just genuinely bizarre. But it was bizarre in a really cool way, and it's cool to see these people like uniting around irreverence. It was just kind of it was a cool thing to witness, and I enjoyed watching. It was very, very funny. There was I'll just let you guys just watch it. You should. I don't know if they're going to have to edit out certain parts of it. I wouldn't be surprised if they do. But hopefully they don't have to, and you guys can see it all in its full glory. And go support those guys as well. All right. Sam Altman is not a blithering idiot. Mentions Moldbug, March 12, 2013. TLDR, Sam Altman is not a blithering idiot. That's what's so scary. When the most elitist minds, like he says, most elitist minds of a society are full of blithering idiocy, that society is probably doomed. Now, just a reminder for those of you who have not read Moldbug, who have not read the way that on Unqualified Reservations, the way that he lays out his stuff. He has lots and lots of stuff that's hyperlinked that he just kind of alludes to it and then has a link there that takes it to something else. So as I'm reading through here, occasionally I'll open those links, and because I'm not just doing a straight read like an audiobook, we'll provide commentary and stuff as we go. And so I'll open those links just so you can see exactly what he's referring to. So when he said, when the most elitist minds of a society are full of blithering idiocy links to Sam Altman's blog and an article he wrote called Growth in Government. And that article starts out, TLDR, without economic growth, democracy doesn't work because voters occupy a zero-sum system. So then he starts talking about startups and democracy and all that kind of thing. So Moldbug says, it's normal for geniuses to be crazed. And there he links to the Wikipedia page for Paul Frampton, who is an English theoretical physicist who works in particle theory and cosmology. And he was convicted of drug smuggling in Argentina and was sentenced to 4 years and 8 months. When he was in the Buenos Aires airport, he checked in a bag containing 2 kilos of cocaine hidden in the lining. And there was more funny stuff that happened after that, but I'll leave that for you to go. If you want to go read about Paul Frampton, you can go do that. Uncle Joey, what is up? Joey in the house. Joey says he is the hard R. You are my hard R, brother. It's good to see you. Joey's a really good friend of Amy's and myself, and actually Jason McCrary. Shout out Jason McCrary who joined us on some of the early episodes of King Pilled. Joey's a really, really good guy who we've met and hung out with. He's Eastwood's honorary uncle, so it's good to see him in the chat. Okay. It's normal for geniuses to be crazed, but Sam Altman, who I don't know, but SF is a small town, and I probably know someone who knows him, isn't a genius, and he definitely isn't crazed. He didn't analyze any 10-dimensional gauge theory or predict any chiral axons. He's just an entrepreneur, i.e., a natural leader, a commodity which, especially in our present dire straits, is, or at least ought to be worth, a whole Bolivian prison full of cocaine-tooting particle physicists. Paul Frampton reference. What I find exceptionally terrifying is that Altman's blithering idiocy looks and sounds exactly like sober good sense. Read it. You'll agree. And he linked back to the Growth in Governments. The basic problem with our society is a disconnect between consensus reality and actual reality. We actually have no shortage of natural leaders, but they cannot actually lead us anywhere. They are operating in consensus reality rather than actual reality. Their joysticks are not plugged in. When the consensus is nonsense, sober good sense is nonsense. Nonsense is no use to anyone. Really? Can blithering idiocy sound like sober good sense? Let's try some. Now he's quoting from Altman. All of that said, in absolute sense, I'd much rather live in the world of today than 1950. It's tough for me to imagine living in a world without the internet. However, in the same way that one can feel acceleration but not velocity, people seem more sensitive to the annual rate of improvement than the absolute quality of life. So even though people should be happier in an absolutely better world, no one wants to stand still on the hedonic treadmill. Most of us want our lives to get better every year. The hedonic treadmill is a pain that way. End quote. The world of 1950. Oh, honey. Okay, let's apply a gross reality check. You're an alien. You're observing Earth with an infinitely powerful telescope from Alpha Centauri. You have a simple question. Since 1950, has human civilization, or American civilization, which amounts to pretty much the same these days, advanced or declined? Apparently, the easiest way for Sam Altman to answer the question is to trade it for a different one. He is not alone in this. He asks, since 1950, has human technology advanced or declined? Clearly, the alien, you, I, and Sam Altman all have the same answer to this question. Any question with an obvious answer is a stupid question. Is an iPad more advanced than a Smith Corona? Is a stupid question. Who asks stupid questions? Obviously, blithering idiots. But we can compose an interesting question by factoring out the stupid question. Which world would Sam Altman rather live in? 2013 with iPads and to internet, or 1950 with iPads and to internet? In a sense, this 1950 is just as real as the real 1950. It exists. Sam Altman cannot pack his bags and move to either the real 1950 or my imaginary super 1950. Both exist only as thought experiments. It is not hard to construct or define the super 1950, though. One run of a time machine with a printout of Wikipedia would be pretty much all the real 1950 needed. Send the technology back to 1945 and you'll have iPads by 55 at the latest. Those guys got things done. The interesting and scary question this thought experiment asks is whether, aside from technical progress, human civilization has advanced or declined since 1950. In actual reality, this too is a stupid question. The answer is no less obvious, I assert. But consensus reality thinks I'm crazy. So with stupid, we must begin. Aside from technical progress, has human civilization advanced or declined since 1950? By what criterion? If Moore's Law is not our benchmark of a successful civilization, what is? Sam Altman has his answer. The hedonic treadmill. Never having sold a startup for 43 mil, there are many subtle, refined, and delicious forms of hedonism of which I am as innocent as a cat of tennis. But allowing, for a moment, this implicit assumption that the purpose of civilization is the satisfaction of human desires, we can refer only to Maslow's pyramid of needs. At the base of the pyramid are air, water, and food. How does 2013 do at supplying oxygen, hydration, and nutrition? How did 1950 do? Just fine. Gentlemen, a draw. The food of 2013 is certainly tastier than that of 1950, at least in America, but this is not the base of the pyramid. Here you can see Moldbug's inner bougie guy coming out, because he's the notion that 2013 is tastier than that of 1950. That seems like something that not everybody would necessarily subscribe to, and the notion that 2013 food is just as good or equal to 1950 is, I kind of don't think that Midwesterners would put that in quite the same way as someone from the coasts would necessarily.
Yeah,
but then Midwesterners like their TV dinners as well. So
fair. I was wondering though if I'm missing something with that, but yeah, I mean, even just the quality of, I feel like I might be being a bit spectrumy right now, or I'm not spectrumy enough. I don't know which one it is, because I'm just thinking, I'm thinking of, all the, if you run into anyone who's like over 50, like they're very inclined to tell you about how tomatoes taste like shit now by comparison to whatever food they like grew up with or
right.
whatever. And I think there's, without having looked at it into great detail, I think that's becoming like sort of a consensus position.
Like even
on,
just
produce.
even if you don't get into like the politics of it or anything, just the base like pollution, like having 60, 70 years of pollution at the level that we have, just by like that alone should change something about the quality of our food. But anyways, that's not the purpose of his.
No, it is the purpose of this, and we are going to.
Next up, safety and security. All right, gentlemen, let's have another thought experiment. Picture the Earth, our beautiful blue
Hey now,
spinning
philosopher.
globe. Take all the habitable land area and color it white as a neutral background for our thought experiment. Now, select the subset of this beautiful planet on which a sober, sensible, civilized person, such as Sam Altman, would consider it prudent and safe to wander, on foot and alone, carrying his iPad at night. Leave that part white, color the other part brown. Then, from the brown subset, select the further subset in which Sam Altman, carrying his iPad, would not consider it prudent and safe to wander in the daytime. Color that part black. Why can't Google Maps do this? Then do the same for Sam Altman's grandfather in 1950 with his portable Smith Corona. Then repeat the exercise for 1900. So if you didn't completely follow what he's saying take the whole Earth, take all the habitable land area, color it white, then take all of the land area that is not only habitable, but you would be perfectly comfortable wandering on foot and alone, holding an iPad at night. So that's a pretty safe, nice, comfortable area. And then leave that part white and color everything else brown. And then go to the stuff where you could only walk around in the daytime alone on foot, where there's not much to threaten you there. So he's narrowing down the truly like peaceful, quality, habitable, safe area in the world. How much of that existed in 1900, how much of it existed in 1950, and how much of it exists today? And clearly, as what he's getting into is that the nature of crime and the rise in crime over that amount of time has rendered a lot of areas that used to be habitable completely uninhabitable now. I'm just kind of giving away the plot a little.
Pretty based, sometimes with all the metaphors and like the big brain shit that you can get lost. But he comes back to these examples of like, how the streets are unsafe. And it's just like, man, this motherfucker really is like as far right as Travis Bickle. You know what I mean? Like, and to answer a question in the audience, someone stupidly asked who Sam Altman is, and Amy, I believe your name is. It's the founder of Walmart. Now continue, Matthew. Like, duh.
I loved everything about that.
It's just, like I was saying, it's just like, you don't have to understand everything you listen to. Some things can be a reach. So you might like the droning, monologues that make you want to kill yourself that you don't understand. It's like, okay, but maybe you can kind of get there. But if you don't know who Sam Altman is, it's like, yeah, next time you need a fucking 48 pack of paper towels, just revisit this. That's all I'm trying to tell you.
Sam Altman is an American entrepreneur, investor, programmer, and blogger. He is CEO of OpenAI and the former president of Y Combinator.
Okay, well they leave out the Walmart thing, but it's because he's not trying to rub it in. He's got other projects.
That's right. They're very humble on Wikipedia. Okay, so Sam Walton, on the other hand. Part of the reason this is such a useful mental exercise, and unfortunately such a difficult one, is that it requires you to actually know what the world was like in 1950 or 1900. If your way of getting this information starts with statistical tables, you're doing it wrong. There are these things called books, which will help you out. If you perform this exercise accurately, or at least if you get the same results as me, you'll see a 20th century quite indistinguishable from state melanoma. And this progress continues to rousing applause and general self-congratulation right up to our own dear official New York Times approved 2013. Hey, been to Egypt lately? What's that Google guy up to these days? Is he still tweeting? That Google guy is a reference to Egypt's new hero. Can geek activist Wael Ghonim overthrow Mubarak? And it's an activist who very clearly is a pawn of some kind of intelligence community or something like that, who was a subject of a Time magazine article on February 8 of 2011. Okay. Speaking of Twitter, I experience this reality check in person every day. My daughter's preschool is at 10th and Howard, 2 blocks from Twitter HQ. It's actually not too hard to park at 10th and Howard. So the average number of what my daughter calls dangerous persons, and what to an ordinary grown-up are basically indistinguishable from zombies, that I and my bubbly daughter have to navigate around between the car door and the security guard is, I don't know, 1.3, 1.7? It can't be much more than 2. They're just zombies, and really they're not that dangerous. I think even zombies can sense that when I'm with a child, I am more dangerous to them than the converse. On the other hand, a couple months ago, a techie, not a Twitter employee, was hit on the head and killed, presumably by zombie or zombies unknown, at 11th and Mission, right around the corner from Tweet Central. Despite a couple of perfunctory boilerplate stories, and of course the victim's wife, no one noticed. No one cared. Why would they? Their iPads have 4.7 million pixels. Suffice it to say that if you don't know how 1950 would have reacted to exactly the same event in exactly the same place, you don't know anything about 1950. Actually, my daughter's preschool is literally in a ruin. That is a nicely renovated space, which used to be part of a Catholic church. The preschool is the former convent. The rest of the church remains a ruin proper. And it's St. Joseph's Church and Complex in San Francisco. Where are the people who used to pray in this church? They fled. Why? Because they were afraid for their physical safety. And when he said they fled, he linked to the Wikipedia article for white flight. And when he said afraid for their physical safety, he linked to the Wikipedia article for ethnic cleansing. I know. It's gauche to even bring this kind of stuff up. It's not part of our consensus reality. It's not part of our consensus history. When it comes to actual history, however, the global decline of security in the second half of the 20th century is, I assert, the salient phenomenon of our era. Much as the fall of the Roman Empire is the salient phenomenon of 4th century AD Europe. Note that while our historians would desperately love to find just one member of the exquisitely literate 4th century AD European culture who would even mention that the Roman Empire was falling apart, no such luck. It's all wall-to-wall, Prudentius and Sidonius. Consider our alien in Alpha Centauri. His telescope is just a telescope. He no speaka the English. He is absolutely invulnerable to our most respected propaganda authorities, and in particular has no way to read the great Harvard scholar, Steven Pinker, truly a Prudentius for our age, who has discovered through elaborate statistical models that the 20th century was not, in fact, the golden age of titanic mass murder and brazen petty crime, but the dawning of a new age of Aquarius in which all will have peace and prosperity. And when he said who has discovered, he linked to The Better Angels of Our Nature, a book by Steven Pinker, Why Violence Has Declined, where Steven Pinker argues that liberalism is responsible for everything good. And when he said Titanic mass murder, he linked to the Black Book of Communism, and brazen petty crime, he linked to a Priceonomics article, How Do You Steal a Bike? Asking for a Friend. Even Pinker is a piker next to the Times, which has published at least 547 stories about NYC's miraculous conquest of its blatantly managed crime statistics, and precisely 2 about the hospital statistics, which show a parallel doubling in actual assault victims. It's always so easy to lie to those who want to be lied to. You hardly even need statistics. The blatantly managed crime statistics, he linked to an article in the New York Times that says crime report manipulation is common among the New York police, study finds. And precisely 2 about the hospital statistics, which show a parallel doubling in actual assault victims. He links to a New York Times article, assault statistics of hospitals and city police seem to differ. But his, referring to the alien from Alpha Centauri, but his is an excellent telescope. So our alien can see the fact that many parts of all and all parts of some American cities that were thriving in 1950 have now fallen into chaos and ruin. On the other hand, he can gaze admiringly at the thriving cafes of University Avenue in Palo Alto, Ausonius Moselle born anew, full of beautiful young people adoring the perfectly anti-aliased individual subpixels of their new Retina iPads. Which of these phenomena will he find more relevant? Which is the narrative? Which the distraction? Continuing the comparison to the fall of Rome, one of the interesting features we see is that logical competence is certainly an indicator of a successful civilization. It is also a lagging indicator. Civilization produces technology, not the other way around. When civilization falls, technology is not the first, but the last thing to fall. Yes, technology does decline in the fall of Rome. No, it has not declined in our era, though its advance has certainly slowed a great deal. This is written in 2013 as a reminder. But the centuries of European technology decline are 400 to 700 AD, a point at which surely any historian would admit that the Roman polity had already been going to the dogs for 2 centuries minimum. It's fascinating that the European technology decline was 400 700 AD, which is a span of time approximately the length of the history of the existence of the United States of America. Like the entire, like since the Revolutionary War is about to now is about the time that he's declaring for the European technology decline. It's just crazy when we think back on historical times, and we'll have like, we'll think of one group of people. It's like, oh yeah, this group of people existed from this point till 500 years later. And we just kind of assume that they're all basically the same people. And it's just, people just kind of like passing the time for 500 years. And 500 years to now is, we can't even comprehend what life was like 500 years ago. And it's changed so much. So like when you look back, when you're like reading stuff about history, especially ancient history, and they just kind of start talking broadly about, like Second Temple Judaism or, like one period, and they just treat it as one large homogenous group of people, and it covers half a millennium. It seems like when I start thinking about that, I'm like, it's really hard to trust the historical conclusions of people that treat history as something like that. That it's just a matter of lining up individual data points centuries apart and drawing a narrative that connects them and just kind of ignoring all the fluff that was in between. Am I too hard on Sam Altman?
Yeah, I hate to do this.
You gotta go.
I hate to pull the alarm on this.
Oh,
but yeah, I had trouble getting back to the button before you started reading. But I had the thought sort of, and I hope this isn't too much of a digression. And I certainly hope that there's not a monotonous, intolerable monologue that results from it. However, much like you're talking about looking at these massive time periods as just kind of just like sort of homogenous things, I was kind of wondering what it would be like, someone like you, someone like me, Poppy Libs, I don't know, it's just whoever you want, Dave Smith, Michael Malley. I just wonder, all those people like in a blob somewhere, like wherever they fall, like on a blank piece of paper, in relation to, just like a shitty neo-lib, just like a, quote unquote ruling class, blue metropolitan type person, with like a profile frame, about making certain health decisions. I wonder, when you go, why are you doing this? You know what? You can play that game, buddy. No, see, I will not do this. I'm wondering if you kind of look at your ancestors, or even just anyone from 100 years ago to, like, how far back do you have to go to where those people are frankly indistinguishable from one another, where you and the people that you can't stand, that you think you're so much smarter than, just appear to be the same person, completely interchangeable. And so it just got me thinking, it's just like all this shit, is any of this worth it? You know what I mean? Like, maybe, it's like, oh, I'm so different because I want to move to the middle of the country and not be bothered. And I don't want to make certain medical decisions that seem to be very strongly suggested right now. But like, does it make any difference, in the grand scheme of things?
No.
It's just interesting to sit with that, because I could like think of different people that I interact with, or have interacted with over the years, where it's just like, oh man, these people are pretty insufferable and have terrible ideas. And it's sort of, it would be like the equivalent of just like me sort of like looking at like one bee or another bee. I don't fucking know. Same shit, really.
You know, and those B's are probably just like, I'm nothing like that other asshole.
Right.
Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, but kinda, no. I mean, what's different?
Yeah. How can you not tell the difference?
Yeah. Yeah. That was a thought yesterday. That was my white pill for yesterday.
He has 8 yellow stripes and I have 7. How can you not possibly know the difference? So what makes that a white pill to you?
No, it's not. No.
Oh,
No.
that was
Yeah.
it was a white pill. It was a white
We were
pill.
doing the I was doing the thing that you did. Yeah.
It was a king pilled white pill.
It's in the fucking in the show planning. We said we were going to do this.
Yeah. I have a headache, remember?
Right.
I have a migraine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Amy's mentioned that. Yeah. Oh, mister, I have a headache.
Yeah. That just reminded me of my favorite joke. This guy comes home from work one day and really late at night. His wife's already gone to bed.
I'm not giving up on this.
And he walks over, kind of tiptoes over, and she's laying down there and she's asleep, kind of snoring.
Mm-hmm.
And so he runs over and he grabs an aspirin and he comes back and he tosses it into her mouth, like tosses it onto the back of her tongue. And she like wakes up coughing and spluttering and choking. And she like spits it out. She's like, "What's this? What's this?" He's like, "It's an aspirin." He's like, "What are you giving this to me for?" She's like, "For your headache." She's like, "I don't have a headache." And he goes, "Oh, good to know."
What an absolute uncle joke, but it's still pretty funny.
You should be the one doing the reading here with that.
Oh, wouldn't that be insane? Oh man, Tim Pool reads mentions Moldbug. That.
Oh my god.
Oof.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
We need to. This has to happen. We have to make this happen. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we have to make it happen. We're the ones who are going to dictate how Tim Pool does his show.
He really would ad lib. Like you give commentary and stuff like that, but he would just do mid sentence ad libs, you know, or like just
totally.
So good, so good. If I had slept a little bit more, I would try to do a paragraph, but it would be a colossal letdown. Yeah.
Tim Pool after TRT.
Oh, thank you. Don't flirt with me, Juan.
I like this. Juan says, one of the reasons I respect Michael Anton so much is because he's the only person besides Moldbug I've seen properly identify how massively different Rome was from 200 BC to 200 AD. If you want to have a really, really good conversation, you need to go listen to Jack Murphy when he hosted Michael Anton and Curtis Yarvin. It is like the best kind of spurging out that you could listen to. The guys are both like absolute complete savants on history, and they're going back and forth, like arguing super like nitty gritty details about. I don't even have the beginning of the historical understanding to actually even make it up. I can't even make up
90 minutes in or something like that. Or I mean, not really, but it's maybe a half hour in, and then like Jack is just like, all right, I could listen to this all day. This is awesome. We got to get to the second question. Exactly. It's fucking great. Yeah. And the thing that was really great, I don't know if he meant to cut that, because sometimes certain people with certain personality types may or may not be fully aware of the social implications and the sort of reactions that people may have when they make certain comments. Especially if they tend to be really smart. That might not be their forte. But someone was making a point that referencing that things were going to pass or things were going to get better in any way. And it was an eloquent point. It was pretty good. And there was some like emotion, behind it. And it seemed like there was some sort of momentum. It was, as an audience member, as I was listening, it felt like it was reaching me. And when they were done, he just goes, that's a lot of cope. I hate to say it. It just totally took the legs right under them. That's so it was just like, yeah, fuck your whole thing that you just said.
Yeah. Good old Kurt.
Oh, Kurt, I miss you, buddy. If you're watching, he often does.
Nicholas says, but then Anton ruins it all by worshiping Abraham Lincoln. Yeah. I don't understand. I don't understand how someone can be that. I don't know how someone can be that whatever word, red pilled, that smart, and then still be that like aware of the nature of the regime, but then not recognize the distinct role that Abraham Lincoln made in creating the regime that he hates so much. It's like, I guess it's cope.
I think but I think you can always kind of tell where somebody came from. You know how like you and I were reading this whole fucking thing. It's just like, wait, you really think the food is better now? Really? Like, it's just that there's always just like some hallmark of where somebody came from, and I don't know enough about that other guy, but I presume that that was his path.
Okay, let's get back to this here. Just so you guys, real quick, if you could let me know in the chat if you care about the way that I have the text displayed, whether it was before with the two small ones on the bottom with the big display, or if it makes any difference to you, then let me know. I'm just kind of trying different stuff to see what looks better, what's more readable, how, I don't know if people like to see more text or if they want to see a little bit or they don't care at all. So
well, I tell
just
you
let me
what's
know
going
what
to
you
make
like.
this whole fucking thing look a lot worse.
Yeah, actually, that's kind of clean things up a little bit here and kind of.
Ooh, go ahead, Daddy.
There we go. Yeah, that's much better. There we go. I don't know who invited that other guy on here. Jamie Spears has agreed to step down from from his longtime role as conservator of his daughter Britney Spears' estate. Interesting. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Am I hard on Sam Altman? After all, he admits there's a problem. He doesn't admit this problem, but isn't his point basically the same, that something isn't working? My America is going to the dogs and lies in ruins all around me. His America has just turned the friction up too high on its hedonic treadmill. But it's the same, isn't it? Sort of. Realizing that something in the 20th century model of governance, as taught by the best and brightest of Harvard, Stanford, the New York Times, and other fine institutions of papally infallible veracity, isn't working out quite right, is indeed a step in the right direction. Everybody's going to have their own particular beef. Mine, as we've seen, is that 75 years of this rigorously scientific system of government has reduced what was once America's fourth largest city to a demon-haunted slum. And, while extreme, this outcome is anything but an exception. He's talking about Detroit. But so far as I can tell, from the Sam Altman perspective, this is just a nitpick. Or maybe it's really sad, but would have happened to any regime. Napoleon, Cato the Elder, Pericles, Peter the Great, morons. None of them could have done a damned thing to save Detroit, Oakland, Baltimore, etc. Not where Harvard failed. And that video is unavailable. So when he says morons, he linked to something. Someone may get that reference. I don't. It's always easy to attribute bad outcomes to irresistible forces of nature, acts of God, etc. Even if you can't identify the force of nature and you don't believe in God. No, Sam Altman is concerned with something entirely different. He is concerned with a number. This number is about 2, he asserts, when it should be more like 5. He calls this number growth, or to be more exact, an even more interesting number, real growth. Growth is, of course, a good thing, especially if you're a startup, but unless you're a tumor. And he links to Edward Abbey, who said, growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell. Once again, this remarkable number, GDP growth, is an essential part of the 20th century of economic governance. Where would we be without Abba Lerner? Well, I don't know. Where would Detroit be without Abba Lerner? Where was Detroit before Abba Lerner? Perhaps the problem with Sam Altman is just that everything he knows about economics he learned at Stanford, whereas everything I know about economics I learned by watching Hardcore Pawn. What does this number actually mean? It clearly means something. We know it goes up when people are happy, generally, and down when they are sad. Perhaps the great historical puzzle of the 20th century is the need to explain the strange phenomenon, broadly defined, of Keynesian economics, which on the one hand seems to make no sense at all, but on the other hand seems to kind of work, at least on a local level. The no sense at all part was he links to Paul Krugman's article, Time for Bottles and Coal Mines, written April 14, 2009. Well, okay, I lied. Yes, Hardcore Pawn is very important to me, but really, I'm a mercantilist, and everything I know about economics I learned by reading Friedrich List. Well, him and Mises. Odd bedfellows, I know. But I really believe there is nothing in, to use its old name, political economy, which is outside the philosophy of these two fine Teutonic gentlemen, opposites though they were. Please allow me to explain growth in this unusual Austro-mercantilist idiom. And Although Ludwig von Mises was Jewish and thus wasn't Teutonic in the usual sense of the term, he was both a German speaker and operated within the framework of the Austrian School of Economics founded by Karl Menger. All right, continuing. Growth is the change in a number called GDP. To an Austro-mercantilist, there are two kinds of GDP, which we call AGDP, actual GDP, i.e. an actually measured number, and FGDP, fudged GDP, which is a GDP multiplied by a mysterious fudge factor. The mysterious fudge factor is the GDP deflator, which, for those who don't know, in economics, the GDP deflator is a measure of the level of prices of all new domestically produced final goods and services in an economy in a year. GDP stands for gross domestic product, the total monetary value of all final goods and services produced within the territory of a country over a particular period of time, quarterly or annually. Like the consumer price index, the GDP deflator is a measure of price inflation or deflation with respect to a specific base year. The GDP deflator of the base year itself is equal to 100. Unlike the CPI, the GDP deflator is not based on a fixed basket of goods and services. The basket for the GDP deflator is allowed to change from year to year with people's consumption and investment patterns. So it's a relative measure. It's not an absolute measure. Which then functions as a mysterious fudge factor. With its usual fine, subtle sense of irony, 20th century economics calls AGDP nominal GDP and FGDP real GDP. So the actual number is called nominal GDP. So it's GDP just like in name, but then they make it real by fudging it. 20th century economics is especially adept at accounting identities. The late great Murray Rothbard once parodied one of its finest absurdities, the equation of exchange, as the amount of water that runs off the ground is the same as the amount of rain that falls from the sky, which is true, but not particularly useful to the weather forecaster. So let's apply one of these identities to understand AGDP. Forget foreign trade, which we'll add back in a sec, and consider an isolated unit like a planet. How do we measure the economic production of the planet? We arbitrarily divide economic actors, with some difficulty but not too much, into consumers and producers, i.e., peasants and businesses. AGDP is simply the total sales of all businesses to all peasants, i.e., if all businesses were one giant business. You can see the attraction of this approach to the mid-20th century central planner, snorting boa-thick lines of pure administrative Bolivian as he plays SimCity with real peasants. AGDP is simply the gross revenues of this monster. So let me read that again without the parenthetical. If all businesses were one giant business, AGDP is simply the gross revenues of this monster. So you take all businesses, you put them into one business, and then you calculate the revenues for that. That's what AGDP is. And he says, you could see the attraction of this approach to the mid-20th century central planner, snorting boa-thick lines of pure administrative Bolivian as he plays SimCity with real peasants. And because the amount of water that runs off the ground is the same as the amount of rain that falls from the sky, AGDP is also the number of dollars that customers spent this year at OGB, the one giant business. I like this approach because it reduces the veiled mystery of growth to a crass urban reality that everyone can understand. What does growth mean? It means spend more, comrades. If growth is good by definition, spending is good by definition, because the amount of water that runs off the ground is the same as the amount of rain that falls from the sky. Aggregate demand is your friend. Spend more, comrades. It's good for the economy. How do you increase AGDP? There are two, and only two ways. One, give the peasants more dollars and or reduce their debt. Two, make them less thrifty and more prodigal. Why is AGDP not increasing fast enough for the likes of Sam Altman, or for that matter, Paul Krugman? Because both these levers are already pushed down to the floor, or at least the second one is. The first one, we'll get there. So the second one is make people less thrifty and more prodigal. So encouraging people to spend, encouraging people to take on debt, encouraging people to max out their expenses. The first one is give them more dollars. So as of 2013, the give them more dollars part was still a little bit hazy, a little bit not completely embraced yet. By now, they're just wildly printing like crazy. Back then, not so much. So What he's saying is that at the time that at least that second lever, the just making them less thrifty and more prodigal, that's already mashed to the floor. And the first one, giving them more dollars, is coming soon. But wait, why increase AGDP? Why is more spending inherently better than less spending? There are two answers to this question corresponding to your understanding of the purpose of an economy. The first is the false position held by Austrians and by Keynesians when they want to confuse you. The belief that the purpose of economic activity is the satisfaction of human desires. More spending means more production, and more production means more satisfaction. This perspective, of course, originates with 18th and 19th century liberals and utilitarians. You can see it all over Sam Altman's hedonic treadmill. This false position leads us down the path of FGDP. Let's explore. Why the fudge factor? Because our goal is not to merely assess the price of all goods produced, a mere number which can be measured by mundane, if fallible techniques, and still worse can actually be defined, but their value, that is hedonic utility. Let me read that again because he phrased that kind of funny. So why the fudge factor? So on going from AGDP to FGDP, why do we have to have a fudge factor in there? Why do we have to have the GDP deflator? Because our goal is not to merely assess the price of all goods produced, that price being a mere number which can be measured by mundane, if fallible techniques, and still worse, can actually be defined. Because the goal here is to get something that's undefined. Because once something is undefined, then that frees you up to do whatever you want. That's what he's working toward. So our goal is not to merely assess the price of all goods produced, but their value, that is their hedonic utility. This is an almost spiritual and essentially qualitative and personal assessment. In usual 20th century style, we damn the torpedoes and jam this subjective quality into an objective quantity by any means necessary. Otherwise, how would we model it? This is the spirit of liberalism. This is the spirit of which libertarianism is just a pure form. This is the spirit of modern, scientific, materialist. I'm not going to go quite down that road just yet. This is the spirit of the age. This is the spirit. I'll say this. This is the spirit of the prince of this world. It's this materialist perspective that we have to quantify every single thing. It's positivism. It's pick whatever ism, whatever buzzword you want to throw at it. This is the spirit of that, where you can't have things that are mystical or abstract or ethereal. You can't be guided by spirituality. You have to make it real. You have to attach it to an actual figure. You have to put it on a spreadsheet. Everything has to be put on a spreadsheet. History has to be put on a spreadsheet. Everything has to be. Religion has to be on a spreadsheet. Everything has to be. You have to break down your doctrines. You have to have a specific list of every single one of your beliefs. This is exactly what we believe. This is why. And I am a Christian because I have memorized all of these beliefs. And if you ask me, I'll tell you what I believe about them. This is the spirit of modern and postmodern materialism. And I'll say what I was going to say. This is the spirit of the Antichrist. I just posted a link today from a clip from Jonathan Pajot, where he describes what the spirit of Antichrist is, and it's related here, and we'll talk about that more in the future. We'll continue this for now. Okay, so the goal is we need to have something here that we can model. So, for example, how much more fun of a computer is an iPad than an Apple II? Is it 37.6 times more fun, or 198.2 times more fun, or even 547.9? It would seem clear to anyone not a blithering idiot that any process which claims to be able to derive any such number is retarded at best and may well constitute felony math abuse. Not at all. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is, in fact, in possession of exactly this figure. Here's how they do it. Since Apple was selling computers continuously from Apple II to iPad, we can look at the period when both the Apple II and Apple III were on sale, divide the list price of the Apple III by the Apple II, later the Mac 512K by the Apple III, and so on until we reach the iPad. This process is called hedonic regression. It is thoroughly official, approved of by both Harvard and the US government. So who's the blithering idiot now? What's especially awesome is to imagine a world with a sane financial system in which the quantity of money, perhaps Bitcoin, is fixed, and so are the time preferences of consumers. As a result, AGDP does not change. AGDP growth is zero by definition in this model. Now you don't need to necessarily grasp everything that when he broke down hedonic regression, you don't need to totally grasp everything that he's saying there. Basically what they're doing is they're using an approximating process to kind of come up with a bullshit number and then presenting it as this is like a gospel. This is the gospel. This is an official number because we have to have official numbers that dictate everything that we do. So if you had a fixed quantity of money where the quantity of money couldn't expand, the rain that falls and the water that runs off the land is the same amount because it's just the same cycle happening and it's fixed, it's contained. If your monetary system is that way and you don't get more dollars or less dollars or more bitcoins or fewer bitcoins, if it's a static, stable, fixed quantity of money, then the AGDP can't change. It's never going to change. It's going to be zero by definition. It can't grow. And what he's getting at is this entire economic system is built on growth. It has to have growth. Growth is the measure of all things good. Without growth, there's death. Now, there's truth to that. But this is false growth. It's fake growth. They're gaming it to create fake growth. And they're revolving the entire society around this fake growth. And it's bending people's psyches to this fake growth. And it's poisoning their spirits. He's not going to get quite as woo-woo as that, but let's continue. But in such a world, nothing prevents the hedonic quality of technology from increasing. Computers can get better. Indeed, they should. And FGDP can increase, though all FGDP increases are due to the GDP deflator, i.e. hedonic fudge. Now consider the logical situation of the Altman position, also held, I think, by Peter Thiel, and certainly not uncommon sensible thinkers. In this constant money, constant AGDP model, the argument is that we want real, or FGDP, rather than inflationary, or AGDP, economic growth. And the only path to this real growth is technology advancement. True enough. In fact, it's so true that it's a tautology. With constant AGDP, we've removed all the variables from the equation. Oops. Let me catch up on some of the comments here. I see some people dropping my name. John, dude, you look like a skinny, all your teeth having ass Mick Foley today. I love it. Thanks, man. Check out that chart of US GDP priced in gold, actual money instead of dollars. Can you send it to me, Poppy Libs? I don't know if the link will come through on the chat here, so you can just text it to me. I'll look at it. Nicholas, that's not true, actually, and that's why Rothbard's quote is dumb. Elaborate, Nicholas. I'm curious to hear what you have to say. GDP is down 40% since 2001 when China entered the WTO. Interesting. Okay, continuing. When AGDP inflation. Oh, I see what he's saying. When AGDP inflation, which none of these technology prophets wants to talk about, falls out of the equation, the argument that we need technical progress to spur growth turns into simply the hedonic treadmill. It expands to 2013 isn't fun enough, so let's get more and better technology to make 2014 more fun than 2013, because otherwise our fun sensors are all burned out and 2014 will be boring. Well, sure. I, for instance, am seriously confused about why anyone in 2013 is still wearing headphones with wires. What's with Bluetooth A2DP? Doesn't it work? And definitely they should speed it up with that Google Glass thing. If that ain't hedonic, I don't know what is, especially when it comes to prawn. Certainly the BLS is falling down on the job if prawn isn't part of their GDP deflator. OMG prawn. What could be more hedonic than prawn? Google Glass plus prawn. That's what. As Glenn Reynolds puts it, faster, please. Glenn Reynolds being Instapundit, who Moldbug has confessed to formally being a fan of. But, this 2013 isn't fun enough argument really doesn't tell us anything at all about why Detroit is a ruin. It doesn't tell us why Baltimore is a ruin. It doesn't tell us why Oakland is a ruin. It doesn't tell us why Stockton is sinking into the Sacramento River, or why Newark could absorb all of Mark Zuckerberg's personal net worth without becoming anything at all like Cherry Hill. What happened here is that, starting with an absurdity, we have reasoned ourselves into nonsense, or at least into prawn. Our premise was that the purpose of economic activity is hedonism, i.e. the satisfaction of human desires. Certainly, technology can satisfy human desires. Prawn can too, and so can heroin. In fact, it would be interesting if the BLS could determine which is more hedonic, the original iPad plus heroin, or the Retina with 4.7 million pixels and maybe just a little codeine to take the edge off. This could be computed easily and with impeccable quantitative rigor by combining Apple price series with the latest data from Silk Road. Silk Road was shut down shortly after this essay was published, yet the principle remains. This absurdity happens to be the consensus reality, yet it is no less absurd. Let's put on our John Carpenter sunglasses and look at the real reality, terrifying though it is. Surely, if you can read all the way down in an essay this long, you can handle the real reality. In what follows, the reader should keep in mind Moldbug's own admonition not to take everything he writes literally. Quote, Defoe was a tricky fellow after my own heart. He too expects you to add your own salt. In actual reality, we are trying to answer the question, how should America be governed? We are therefore reasoning from the perspective of the state. Since sovereignty is conserved, the state is always and everywhere absolute and omnipotent. Therefore, the hedonic satisfaction of its citizens, who are in fact its slaves, is not and cannot be a goal. It may be a means to an end, of course. And when we administer heroin through the barracks water supply to reward Camp Number 127 for exceeding its uranium production target 3 months in a row. Well, see, I told you reality was scary. I don't actually believe absolute government, which is always and everywhere the reality, implies totalitarian government. USG is an absolute government as well. I'm not a big USG fan, but I don't seem to find myself in the uranium mines. In general, the classic 20th century phenomenon of totalitarianism appears not in absolute governments that are secure and invulnerable, but in extremely weak ones that in consequence have to take extraordinary measures to repress their enemies. This, among other things, is the difference between Louis XIV and Stalin. USG's great virtue is that its monopoly of power is far more secure than Louis XIV's, so it just doesn't give a damn what I post on my stupid blog. But if we are analyzing real governments in the real world, our financial analysis has to be rooted in political reality. The political reality is that citizens are not owners of their government, but rather assets. In other words, slaves. Our only hope is for a regime that's more Thomas Jefferson and less Simon Legree. Fortunately, as we'll see, this analysis aligns the financial interests of the state with our own interests as human beings. What are the financial interests of the absolute state? To maximize the value of its productive assets. The state's assets are A, land and buildings, B, equipment, and C, human chattel. We understand how to value and manage A and B just fine, but most of its equity consists of C, an asset not really taught in most business schools. Fortunately, you still have those yellow old stacks of DeBoe's Review, which is a widely circulated magazine of agricultural, commercial, and industrial progress and resource in the American South during the upper middle of the 19th century from 1846 until 1884. Before the Civil War, the magazine recommended the best practices for wringing profits from slaves. There is another way to ask whether, excluding advances in technology, which do fall under C since technology is a human ability, but hard to monopolize, America is a more valuable nation in 2013 than it was in 1950. We can ask, is the average American a better human being than his or her ancestors of 1950? I.e., has USG cultivated its human capital or wasted it? For example, is this person, this asset, this slave, a harder worker? We'll assume the state cannot change his IQ because I've seen no evidence that it can. But is he more knowledgeable? Is he more moral, more physically healthy, wiser, more prudent, a better father, a better mother? Again, I believe the answer is obvious. There are certainly some ways in which the average American of 2013 is a better person than his grandfather. He's probably a better feminist, for instance. He's much less likely to be an anti-Semite, homophobe, etc. These factors don't really affect his economic value, but perhaps they're worth mentioning anyway. On the other hand, the American of 2013 is much more likely to be a meth head, a thug or hoe, a worthless trustafarian slacker, etc., etc., etc. Especially when we look at non-elite ethnic subpopulations, cracker, Scots-Irish, African-Americans, etc. Though, if you listen to Ron Unz, even the Jews are going to the dogs. I don't think any serious person could really claim that the average American is superior as a human being to his grandparents. You might as well assert that the original iPad was the greatness, but this Retina crap they're making these days is just lame. What's notable about this interpretation is that, again, your interests and your government's are just about perfectly aligned. You don't want to be a heroin addict. Washington doesn't want its slaves to be heroin addicts. You want to be a better person, more informed, more reliable, more capable. As a better person, you are a better and more valuable capital asset. You augment your government's market cap. Back to Sam Altman. Quote, most of us want our lives to get better every year. The hedonic treadmill is a pain that way. Close quote. As hedonic implies, better means more fun. Obviously, this is the attitude you'd expect from someone born in the Bush administration. Could it be any other way? Us old Nixon fogies have pretty much exhausted the hedonic treadmill. There's not much left of your hedonic treadmill after the 17th time cleaning up baby hork in the middle of the night. At that point, yes, new parents, it does get better. A nice glass of wine and a dinner out with your wife is more or less the hedonic equivalent of a meth-fueled three-way with strippers. Most of us want to become better people every year. We're pretty confident, perhaps falsely, that this will lead to more hedonic rewards in the long run, or at least has the best chance of doing so. But this isn't the goal. The goal, believe it or not, is to become better people. And ideally, our children will be even better than us. So again, the market cap goes up. Everything I'm saying here, including the economics, was said by Carlyle more than 150 years ago, notably in Chartism. The apotheosis of the hedonic principle is the immortal pig philosophy. Briefly, Carlyle tells us, the difference between man and beast is that maximization of hedonic utility is always and everywhere the method of a beast. Not coincidentally, it is also the method of a toddler. And it is also the method of the Austrian economist, although he at least realizes that the utility function is qualitative and subjective rather than quantitative and objective, and adds time preference. To Mises and Rothbard, the human being as economic actor is a very smart pig, often willing to exchange less slop today for more slop tomorrow. This is not at all the view of Carlyle, nor is it the view of List. Of course, from the economic perspective of the state, slop production is all that matters. But the human being is not only an economic actor, nor is the state only an agency of production. What we'd really like to see is a model in which there is no tension between pig philosophy, which must be acknowledged as true, and actual human civilization. We are now in a position to attack the mystery of growth. Why, if economic hedonism is such a shallow and easily debunked philosophy, do so many people take growth so seriously? All subterfuges and evasions to the contrary, the basic economic problem faced by 20th century governments, somewhat less in the 19th century, far more in the 21st century, is unemployment. The cause of unemployment is simple. In an industrial economy, most human beings are economically useless. They are not productive assets at all. They're liabilities. For a brief transitional period, they could still be used as industrial robots. This period is close to its end. I think that's a really, really key observation there, and it's pretty remarkable that he was making this observation 9 years ago. Which anyone, in fairness to other people, anyone who was really like tuned in and paying attention recognized that this is the trajectory. I didn't then because I was, younger and dumber than I am now. But we kind of, I think, implicitly treat all societies alike, and in an industrial society, there's the vast majority of things that go on that sustain the society, that keep that are the most crucial, integral parts of the society. Most people just plain and simple aren't qualified for it. The majority of people are not super intelligent, can't be trained to do a lot of things, and have to accept basically kind of a level of mediocrity. They have to be supported. They have to be sustained by someone else. In past societies, there was certain names, there was certain categories for that type of person. In this society, we take that type of person and we pretend that they're exactly equal to everybody else, that there's no problems with them whatsoever, and that they are perfectly equal and perfectly capable as anybody else to sustain themselves in the exact same way. And ultimately, a lot of these people wind up on some sort of support, some kind of government dole or something like that. And we pretend that they aren't wholly dependent, economically negative people or assets or entities. And it sounds harsh to talk about it that way, but this is kind of the reality of economics. Most people cannot pull their own weight. They have to be pulled by someone else. There are lots of people who can pull their own weight. Most people cannot. There's such a large number of people who cannot that ultimately they become a net negative on the society when you try to make the society, you try to pretend that everyone is equal and perfectly capable. So in a sense, a lot of the ideas that are complete no-no ideas, in many ways, we still have that exact same dynamic in our society. We just pretend that we don't. We pretend that we are better. We pretend that we are more evolved. We pretend that we that we are civilized, and those past cultures were just completely uncivilized and barbaric. I mean, which is more barbaric? Treating someone as they're capable of being treated, or as they're worthy of being treated, or trying to pretend that they're not and force them to live up to something that they never can, and then entrap them in a predatory system where it's perpetual gaslighting. No, no, no. You aren't a slave. You're perfectly capable of supporting yourself. You're just as free and independent and worthy as any other person. All the while, they're completely entrapped, drugged, made completely dependent, and led around by the ear while they're lied to. Like, that's pretty barbaric to me. But, I'm just a bigot. So for a brief transitional, he says that the cause of unemployment is simple. In an industrial economy, most human beings are economically useless. They are not productive assets at all. Yeah, 969. Subscribe, folks. Like, share, and subscribe. We won't be around here for long. They are not productive assets at all. They're liabilities. For a brief transitional period, they could still be used as industrial robots, which is basically what's been happening for the last, 75 years. Human beings, many human beings have been treated as industrial robots. They've been bought off with 401ks and paid medical care and all the what other benefits people have given them. But they're basically just you point them and they just go like do their thing. And they need someone there to support them and sustain them and give them the tools and everything else. There's a reason that entrepreneurship is not for everybody. As Jason Stapleton likes to say, the world needs ditch diggers too. And there's a lot of ditch diggers out there. So what do you do when you don't need ditch diggers anymore? What do you do when ditch digging is automated? What happens to the ditch diggers? Do you keep pretending that they aren't wholly dependent on other people to sustain them and keep them alive and provide them with employment, provide them with whatever stuff they can't provide for themselves? Do you continue entrapping them into living a lie, or are you completely honest? Like, these people are completely dependent. They are wholly dependent and need to be sustained by someone else. And you just make that relationship formal. You are someone else's property. That doesn't mean you're mistreated. Quite the contrary. It means that these people are explicitly responsible for you. The state's not responsible for you. The state will act like they're responsible for you, but they're not responsible for you. They're not going to be there for you. So you could transition that relationship to one where people are explicitly responsible for you. They'll provide for you. They'll provide you a place to live. They'll provide you a place to sleep. They'll provide you food. They'll provide you all these things that you need. They'll take care of you when you're sick. They'll do whatever else. And in return, you provide value to them. This is the nature of all human relationships throughout all of human history. But this is the nature of liberalism, where it retains like the worst parts of the relationships, but it just like paints over it and says, nope, it's not there. Everything's all great and fine. Nope, slavery's gone. We outlawed slavery. We abolished it. There's no slavery anywhere. Can't you tell? Can't you tell how free everyone is? Look how perfectly free they are. They're so happy. There's no opioid epidemic. There's no recession. There's no collapse. These people aren't impoverished, desperate, depressed. There aren't people there isn't an epidemic of suicide. What are you talking about? Everyone's free, perfectly free and happy, as free as we could ever be. Good thing we abolished slavery, right? Just don't read that 13th Amendment too clear. Don't read that too closely. Just accept it. We abolished slavery. Don't worry. For instance, suppose a Sam Altman were given plenary power over the US economy, reorganized into one giant business. His mission: cut costs while maintaining production. His methods: eliminate white collar busy work, real estate agents, lawyers, medical billing clerks, etc. Replace human industrial robots with actual industrial robots. And when all else fails, replace high cost American labor with low cost Indians housed in barracks and fed only on lentils, Dubai style. Does anyone doubt that aggressive and autocratic application of these methods could reduce US employment by 5 to 10% for at least a decade? Indeed, as the singularity nears, the future of work becomes clear. There is an IQ threshold below which any human, no matter how cheap to feed, is a liability. Classic unskilled manual labor remains productive in some domains, gardening, house cleaning, and so on. Perhaps this will be true for another decade or two. It will not be true indefinitely. As the machines get smarter, assuming they get smarter, the threshold will rise. Eventually, the only human beings worth employing will be Sam Altman and his friends. Then, at last, even they will be laid off. Universal unemployment is the definition of the singularity. I'm going to say that one more time. Universal unemployment is the definition of the singularity. Now, it's important to note that from a strictly economic perspective, there is no problem here at all. The absolute state, as pig philosopher, has a simple answer. As Stalin put it, no person, no problem. These surplus human robots can simply be sacrificed, like worn out lab mice. At this point, they stop being liabilities and become assets again, since they can be sold as organs, or at least organ meats. Certainly, when the state itself becomes a computer, this logic will be irresistible. Let's call this approach to human liabilities solution A. So he's laid out the case for why there are human liabilities. And lots of people aren't going to like him talking about this way, but the fact that you don't like it doesn't take the problem away, doesn't make it go away. So he's going to start breaking down the possible ways that you can solve this problem. The first one is effectively biodiesel vats, if you remember the Patchwork series. That's solution A. Obviously, he says from a political perspective, solution A is a non-starter. Hopefully, it will always remain a non-starter. If we are entirely wedded to pig philosophy, we can explain this by saying that sacrificing human liabilities, especially within earshot, actually damages the capital value of the non-sacrificed pigs because it terrifies and demoralizes them. But is this true? Might it not motivate them instead? Whatever. There are more things in my philosophy than pigs, and yours too as well, and while I am quite willing to take a king, I draw the line at a computer king, especially if the computer king is programmed entirely with pig philosophy. Since I am more tolerant in this regard than most, I just don't see solution A happening. We move on to solution B, which I think is the solution most people believe in. Work? Who the hell wants to work? Work is anti-hedonic by definition. If it didn't have negative utility, it wouldn't be work. So it's supposed to be a problem that in the future, work will be obsolete and we'll be able to produce goods and services without any human labor at all. That doesn't sound like a problem to me. It sounds like a victory. The problem with solution B is that we've already tried it quite extensively. You see solution B every time you go to the grocery store. Next to the button marked debit credit is one marked EBT. Ever press that button? Even just by mistake? It's the solution B button. America has entire cities that have moved beyond anti-hedonic labor disutility and entered the gleaming future of solution B. One of them is called Detroit. Solution B is not the culmination of human civilization, it turns out, but its destruction. Even in terms of mere pig philosophy, it is destructive because it ruins a human asset. If we appraise humans as robots, we see that this is a special kind of robot. It rusts up if not continually operating. As beasts, we are beasts who evolved to work. Our species achieved world domination as a result of our capacity for work. To feed and entertain a human being without requiring productive effort, or at least some simulation of it, is in the end just a way to destroy him. Not too different from solution A. It's a really, really fantastic observation that solution A, turning human beings into biodiesel supply sources, organ meat sources, is effectively, in the end, exactly the same as solution B, which is to turn human beings into massive blobs, commodified, and used as an asset. There are some human beings, Sam Altman presumably among them, who are natural aristocrats. They can acquire the resources they would need to never work again and still continue to work. While this is lovely, we need to face the reality that the human species is what it is. The population does not consist largely or even significantly of natural aristocrats. Not, for instance, in Detroit. Dead corpses, the rotting body of a brother man, whom fate or unjust men have killed, this is not a pleasant spectacle. But what say you to the dead soul of a man, in a body which still pretends to be vigorously alive and can drink rum? Carlyle knew all about hardcore pawn. And for the sake of the channel, we haven't hit 1,000 yet, so I'm not going to actually read the name of that piece where it is drawn from. But you can read it here, right there. Occasional discourse on the Dinger question. Beyond the creepy A and B, all solutions to the problem involve a state which compels, through economic or other means, it hardly matters, humans who are not economically productive to submit to work or some simulation thereof. Yes, I cheated. I almost said I tweeted. I cheated. Get some water here. Not all of us can be Fat Comic Dave. If you've seen the episode with Shoe on Head last night, you would understand that reference. Beyond the creepy A and B, all solutions to the problem involve a state which compels, through economic or other means, it hardly matters, humans who are not economically productive to submit to work or some simulation thereof. For instance, especially with the Oculus Rift, technology is beginning to present us with a solution C, which combines physical imprisonment with virtual enrichment. It's not clear what a life-scale virtual environment would consist of, but it would surely involve work or something like it. I don't find solution C particularly creepy, but I may be alone in this. It is certainly less creepy than A or B. I suspect that if it was done right, the customers would vastly prefer it to their present vile circumstances. But I also suspect that it will never happen. C, if you don't get the hint here, C is basically physically imprisoning people and then having them wear VR headsets and live in a virtual reality in perpetuity. That would be their. You can go there and you'll be completely supported. They'll give you everything you want. You get your slop every day. You get whatever you need. Constant dopamine drips. That whole shebang, and in return, you stay imprisoned and you stay there forever. And they harvest you. Maybe you're doing digital work or whatever. They get their pound of flesh somehow. That would be solution C. He's gone into, there's a few other places where he's gone into more detail about what that would look like. And he's doing it from the perspective of someone who's like, okay, how do we make this so that people would actively choose this, that people would want this? And he breaks it down. He's got one, I don't remember which piece it was. He might have mentioned it in the Patchwork series. He's got one on Unqualified Reservations. And then on Gray Mirror, he has another one recently where he elaborated on it even more. And basically it's probably something like that is coming in the future. And it's a matter of whether it's going to be done for the sake of whether people are going to be forced into it, whether they're going to volunteer for it, and is there really going to be the difference? Like, is it kind of end up being the same? So those are the three options so far: biodiesel, the current solution where you pay people not to work, or three, you put people in VR. You have people live in a VR prison, Black Mirror style. Beyond A, B, and C, we enter the domain of solutions which involve distorting labor markets to integrate these human liabilities into some semblance of a normal institution of production. Solution D is the obvious approach and has been practiced by regimes around the world since Cheops was a little boy. To keep the peasants fit, healthy, and happy, you pay them to do otherwise unnecessary work, like, building pyramids. I'll have to differ with him. I don't think that was the purpose of the pyramids, but we'll leave that for another conversation. There is an apocryphal anecdote which illustrates solution D perfectly. It probably never happened. A famous American economist, Milton Friedman perhaps, is visiting China, perhaps in the 80s, and sees a construction project where workers are digging a canal with picks and shovels. Why not use bulldozers, the economist suggests. But Professor Friedman, his host points out, this is a jobs project. Oh, says the apocryphal profession. Well, in that case, why are they using picks? Why not give them spoons? While this is meant to illustrate the supposed idiocy of Solution D, it actually illustrates the design space. The purpose of Solution D is to lose as little money as possible while maintaining the human quality of your assets and preventing them from degenerating into hardcore pawn customers, 10th Street zombies, or other revolting parodies of the human condition. Digging ditches with appropriate hand tools is a simple and almost ennobling, in its own small way, form of manual labor which is ideally suited to the condition of most humans, delicate aristocrats perhaps excepted. It is possible to construct make work for delicate aristocrats, but it takes more imagination. And he linked to Federal Project Number 1, which is a collective name for a group of projects under the Works Progress Administration, a New Deal program in the United States. Of the $4.88 billion allocated by the Emergency Relief Appropriation Act of 1935, $27 million was approved for the employment of artists, musicians, actors, and writers under the WPA's Federal Project Number 1. In its prime, Federal Project Number 1 employed up to 40,000 writers, musicians, artists, and actors because, as Secretary of Commerce Harry Hopkins put it, hell, they've got to eat too. This project had two main principles. One, that in time of need, the artist, no less than the manual worker, is entitled to employment as an artist at the public expense. And two, that the arts, no less than business, agriculture, and labor, are and should be the immediate concern of the ideal commonwealth. I feel like there's a artist and socialist joke in here. There's probably a whole bunch of them, but my head hurts and I'm not getting to it right now. So let's continue reading. Digging ditches with spoons is a degrading punishment appropriate only for refractory pedophiles. Since there is never any shortage of ditches you'd rather have than not, there is no need to issue spoons unless the purpose of the project is exemplary degradation. So what's the problem? Why isn't USG sending its millions of gangstas, its hundreds of thousands of zombies, and its unaccountable hordes of ordinary young people who just can't find a damn job to self-improvement through labor facilities where they create gleaming new national parks, which no one ever visits, on the North Slope of Alaska? It might seem illiberal, but it can't be. FDR did it. In general, make-work programs are restricted to strong governments. Ours is a large government, but by no means a strong one. FDR's was a strong one. When a strong government wants to create jobs, it just hires people. If the product is useless and the work is just make work, it says so. The strong are confident and can tell the truth. A weak government has to shroud the truth in a cloak of lies. It has to convincingly pretend that our great nation may be doomed without substantial and immediate improvements to gates of the Arctic National Park. Oddly, make work, a superior solution by any standard, is a softer political target than good old Solution B, welfare. Make work has to be defended by lies, whereas welfare is indefensible. The defenders of welfare are therefore forced into the brazen fortress of property. They and their clients must assert that they are entitled to these emoluments, which is, of course, the one thing they ain't. But having established adverse possession, they make a pretty good go of retaining it. Adverse possession, sometimes colloquially described as squatters' rights, is a legal principle in the Anglo-American common law under which a person who does not have legal title to a piece of property, usually land, may acquire legal ownership based on continuous possession or occupation of the property without the permission of its legal owner. The possession by a person is not adverse if they are in possession as a tenant or licensee of the legal owner. So basically, once people start getting welfare, they do a really good job of keeping it and declaring that they're entitled to it, even if it's pretty clear that they aren't. Politically, the ideal way to apply Solution D is to make the actual work as separate as possible from the source of funding. This brings us back to AGDP and growth. You didn't think we were digressing, did you? Politically, the best way to fund and operate make work is to make it indistinguishable from the rest of the economy. If you tax productive citizens $1 trillion a year to employ 10 million Americans to build with hand tools one-to-one copy of Rome at the base of Mount Igikpak, you create a giant political target for stupid, unruly peasants who persist in not understanding the genius of Lord Keynes. If, instead, you manage to inflate aggregate consumer spending by $1 trillion, you create ordinary jobs for ordinary Americans all across America, because where does that $1 trillion go? Some of it winds up as profit, of course, but most of it goes into the costs of production, i.e. labor costs, i.e. creating jobs. The love is spread all over the country as a delicious, buttery layer of prosperity. No one votes against prosperity. Ever. Of course, you're still annoying the people you tax. Nor is it possible to pump tax money directly into consumer spending. It has to go through government spending instead. This makes two targets: the taxation, and the spending. It can be managed, but it can also be improved. Suppose you borrow instead of taxing. This is better because no one feels the bite. However, government borrowing, which as we've discovered is identical in every way to mere money printing, i.e., equity issuance, since fiat currency is government equity and there is no real accounting distinction between Fed and Treasury or between Fed notes and Treasury obligations, still has a downside. So again, however, government borrowing still has a downside. The downside is that it's reported and has to appear in the newspapers, alarming the stupid peasants who persist in not understanding the genius of Lord Keynes, instead believing that Washington has to pay back its debts as though it were some stupid peasant. Moreover, even the most dedicated bureaucrat, who is more Keynesian than Keynes himself, feels a slight sense of alarm about the indiscriminate use of this privilege, because somewhere in the back of his reptile brain, he understands what he is doing, imposing a stealth capital levy on the wealthy by diluting the dollar supply. Suppose dollar holders evaded this tax, which after all is a tax, by switching to some other monetary asset. Gold? Bitcoin? Honus Wagner baseball cards? Besides, if the dollars have to pass through Washington, the spending side remains a target. I want to make sure that you guys don't miss that line. The stupid peasants who persist in not understanding the genius of Lord Keynes, instead believing that Washington has to pay back its debts as though it were some kind of stupid peasant. Washington doesn't have to pay back its debts. Therefore, absolutely the best way to inflate a GDP is to increase private sector capitalization, generating a wealth effect. Moreover, there are two ways to do this, since there are two forms of capital asset, debt and equity. Debt is dangerous. See you, Joey. Debt is dangerous because it has to be paid back. More on this in a moment. So we have a second best way to inflate a GDP, convincing the private sector to borrow more, and a first best way, making the stock market and real estate go up. The latter is solution D1, the absolute bestest way, from a political perspective, to create jobs, and the mainstay of the Greenspan-Bernanke era of American prosperity. In short, our actual reality. The former is solution D2, as practiced in the great nation of China, and, wonderfully, Angola. Is there a downside? Of course there is. Capitalization, debt or equity, is supposed to reflect actual capital. When you increase capitalization, debt or equity, without a corresponding creation of productive assets, you are storing up trouble. Excessive market cap is like nuclear waste. If it gets out, as in 2008, you have a problem. Fortunately, this problem can always be solved by solution D3, printing money to buy nuclear waste. Note that all of this is a question of financial alchemy. None of it has anything at all to do with the resolution on your iPad or other technology ingredients that go into computing the FGDP hedonic deflator. It is all a matter of AGDP. It's true that AGDP inflation is reflected in FGDP, but the number that matters is AGDP, the quantity of money, not the quality of products. If you try to solve the problem of inadequate AGDP inflation by improving the GDP deflator, i.e., by better technology, you are committing cargo cult economics. You are trying to cause a cause with an effect. I don't know of many people that could explain something like this so concisely, which is funny because you typically don't think of conciseness when you think of Moldbug. But the way he's able to make this thing, to make it so clear as a picture, is just fascinating to me. And then he does it so concisely. He like phrases like you are trying to cause a cause with an effect. That's why I can't stop reading him. I can't stop reading because of stuff like that. I just wanted to point out here again, just to make it clear, that capitalization is supposed to reflect actual capital. When you increase capitalization, debt, or equity without a corresponding creation of productive assets, you're storing up trouble. That's the definition of a bubble. So you get the bubble where you've increased capitalization, but the actual productive assets that go with it aren't there. This is one thing that has made me squirm each time I hear people talk about how it's because of capitalism that this is the wealthiest nation in the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And viewed in isolation, sure, you could say in a sense that we are the wealthiest nation in the world if you think of things in strictly monetary terms. But huge amount of that wealth has come, number one, at the expense of other countries, and number two, at the expense of the future. It's been pulled forward. So it's kind of like someone who went like massively into debt and they bought they bought a really expensive lifestyle, and maybe they own a really, really nice house and lots of really nice cars. But if you look at their actual ratio of debt, they're wildly more in debt than they're completely upside down. So they look really wealthy, they act really wealthy, they seem to have all these fantastic assets, but it's not going to last. Like eventually you're going to have to pay the piper. And that's the scenario that we have here. So I understand what people are saying when they say that we're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, but that's come at a cost. And if you take things, if you take the entire timeline and you take our future and you weigh it against our present, then we actually aren't that wealthy at all. You can get into intangibles and things get much more subjective, but I would say on the level of intangibles, as he's pointed out elsewhere in this piece and in other pieces, intangibly, we aren't that wealthy either. This is a very spiritually impoverished country. So, and when you're talking about this country, really at this point, the rest of the world are all just kind of like client states of the U.S. So it extends to a large degree to a lot of other countries as well. But some of them have managed to not degrade quite as much so far yet. We'll see. Anyways, continuing the reading. I'm going to read this paragraph one more time. Note that all of this is a question of financial alchemy. None of it has anything at all to do with the resolution on your iPad or other technology ingredients that go into computing the FGDP hedonic deflator. It's all a matter of AGDP. It's true that AGDP inflation is reflected in FGDP, but the number that matters is AGDP. So the number that matters is nominal GDP, not real GDP that has been fudged. He's saying the number that matters is AGDP, the quantity of the money, not the quality of the products that have been created, not the value of the technology. That's being reflected by this fudge factor that kind of just clouds the works. What he's saying is what matters is nominal GDP, the actual tangible stuff without the fudge factor. If you try to solve the problem of inadequate AGDP inflation by improving the GDP deflator, i.e., by better technology, you're committing cargo cult economics. Again, civilization creates technology. Technology does not create civilization. So if you're borrowing from the future to dump into technology now and you improve your technology, so you borrow from the future, you improve the technology, but the actual value of your nation remains down here, it doesn't improve concordantly, then you're committing cargo cult economics. You're trying to cause a cause with an effect. The civilization has to advance and the technology come with it. You can't get it the other way around. You can't advance the technology and have this civilization come with it. In fact, that's the definition of corruption. Like that's every single nation that has every single people group, humanity at large. That's the road to hell. Is unearned technology, unearned knowledge, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, getting unearned knowledge ahead of time, trying to mature too quickly. Invoke Uncle Ted here as well. Yeah, popular liberty. You can't create a libertarian society with laws. Bingo. Is there any problem at all with this insane machine? Sure there is. It's insane after all. Its insanity is totally disproportionate to its actual purpose, i.e., employing otherwise idle and useless humans. As we'll see, a sane regime could accomplish the same goal far more sanely. A financial system is a central planning mechanism. To the extent that a planning mechanism, whether automatic or bureaucratic, is sane, it instructs economic actors to make sane and rational decisions, like investing in productive assets. To the extent that it instructs economic actors to do insane things, like building empty cities in the middle of Mongolia, its automatic and supposedly free market nature is no different from the bureaucratic insanity of a Gosplan or the autocratic insanity of I have no idea how to pronounce that. I'm not even going to try. Yeah. Who fue, yeah, no, I'm not even going to try. This guy here, for those who are listening, Houphoue with the umlaut T hyphenated Boigny. He was the first president of Ivory Coast, serving for more than 3 decades until his death. A tribal chief, he worked as a medical aide, union leader, and planter. Before being elected to the French Parliament, he served in several ministerial positions within the French government before leading the Ivory Coast following independence in 1960. Throughout his life, he played a significant role in politics and the decolonization of Africa. Okay. So to the extent that a financial planning system instructs economic actors to do insane things, its automatic and supposedly free market nature is no different from the bureaucratic insanity of a Gosplan or the autocratic insanity of this guy. Of course, it still fulfills its actual mission of creating jobs, but not without significant and unnecessary financial weirdness, whose only purpose is to pretend that the machine is not, in fact, a make-work scheme. In America, the consequence of job creation through AGDP inflation is the notorious FIRE economy, a central planning system in which the only income source is asset price inflation, and the employment created involves Mexican immigrants installing granite countertops and nice white ladies selling real estate to each other. For instance, this is essentially the economy of Ohio, once one of the world's great industrial centers. As a way for human beings to spend their time, frankly, it seems lame and depressing. Is it that much better than digging ditches with spoons? Moreover, nuclear waste is dangerous. A critical point is passed in an event like that of 2008, which might be described as the transition from debt capitalism to debt communism. Under debt capitalism, it is possible to sustain the illusion that both borrower and lender are private sector agents. Under debt communism, a state we have now attained, borrowing remains a private action, but the Fed is now and forever the lender of first resort. The bottom line is that, in business terms, what's wrong with the American economy is very simple. It loses money. In order to keep operating on an even keel, it needs to borrow roughly $1.2 trillion a year. That is much smaller than it is now. In other words, we have a simple way to get 2% AGDP growth per year. Expand the debt bomb by 2% a year. So just borrow that extra 2%. That's the way you grow the economy, is you borrow the extra 2% every year. We can also inflate the stock and real estate markets, which is better, of course, because equity does not create obligations. It's a way of enriching the rich at the expense of the poor. But hey, what else is new? Because if you just, this basically what's happened is all this money has been printed, and the people that get the money invest it straight in the stock market. So the stock market gets inflated, or they take it and they invest it into assets like real estate. So the real estate market gets inflated, but these are artificial inflations. They don't reflect the actual subjective personal value, the way people actually evaluate those things. So it's giving the impression of a society that's much more optimistic than it actually is. And as that becomes more and more evident, as people begin to realize that there isn't the same cause for optimism as they thought, you begin realizing how much of your society is people walking around putting on a fake face and pretending things are better than they aren't. And so the actual things that are causing things not to be better are going unaddressed. People aren't actually addressing these problems because they don't look like problems. We made up a fake number that makes it look like there's no problem here. And if you actually talk about there being a problem, then you're going to be persecuted, because remember, our fake number says that there's no problem. You can't question our fake number. Our fake number is the oracle of the gods. Thank goodness we have high priests like Paul Krugman who can inform us about these sacred numbers. And we can continue to trust the oracles of the gods to provide for us, because look, they always have in the past. Look how rich and wealthy our country is. Look, everything gets better every year. Look at this growth. It's continuing, unended. It never stops. Bigger, better. Eventually, the piper has to be paid. And then you get into those intangibles, the psychological effect of all of that. And this is a situation that was created because we couldn't have explicit slavery. We had to create this situation instead. We couldn't tell people that they're involved in an elaborate make-work Rube Goldberg scheme. You have to pretend that they're free. And so we get this. We get the absolute clusterfuck that is the global economy today. A money-losing economy, like a money-losing restaurant, sucks. It sucks in all kinds of ways that have no apparent connection to finance. The entire dining experience is grim. This, indeed, is the experience of the entire old economy outside the little bubbles of Silicon Valley and Wall Street. My in-laws live in Columbus. Columbus sucks. Even with Chairman Ben's $85 billion a month bond buying recovery, it is more and more palpably a Soviet restaurant. The fantasy of the money-losing economy, like that of the money-losing restaurant, is that if enough money is pumped in, eventually the pump will be primed and the engine will restart on its own. On this theory, America has been expanding its debt bomb since the 1930s. Yo, it's not working. I'd be happy to bet any sum of money on what would happen if Chairman Ben turned off the QE. If you are into professional betting, bet on zero interest rates for the infinite future. Capitalism, quote unquote, with zero interest rates is a mockery and a monstrosity. But there is no alternative within the system. Worse, we will face a 2008 all over again when the private sector's debt becomes so large that even borrowing from an infinite lender is no longer a market operation. Goldman Sachs can borrow at 0%, but you can't. Debt has to be serviced. Debt saturation happens. When it happens, debt deflation begins. And in a debt deflation phase, even borrowing at 0% is no longer a market operation. Once debt deflation begins, there is no alternative but reflation by direct government spending in the classic Bernanke helicopter mode. While the political system is always capable of helicopter drops in theory, it may not be capable of it in practice. And if it can achieve direct inflation, it has still entered a purely Soviet mode in which all investment is directed by the state. And all of this just so that marginally employable Americans with an IQ of 95 can have jobs, which many of them can't. Evaluated as a job creation mechanism, which is what it is, this insane financial inflation machine earns no better than a C minus. Granted, it has put us so far behind the debt 8-ball that if you turn it off, you go straight from C minus to F minus, which was about to happen in 2008 before Bernanke fired up his helicopter. It's a trap, and the bait isn't even that tasty. Sure, there are other solutions. Oh, no. So are there other solutions? Is there a solution E? An F? Well, sure. They're not politically possible. Nothing other than what we are doing now is politically possible, at least not without regime change. As Hunter S. Thompson put it, that bothers me the way VD bothers a Hell's Angel, if not less. E is a factor that we left out. Foreign trade. As it happens, the US, with its disastrous 37% labor force non-participation rate, i.e., the real measure of unemployment, which is commonly cited in terms of the meaningless benefit claims number, besides borrowing $1.2 trillion a year, runs a trade deficit of $600 billion a year, i.e., 3% of US GDP. What does this mean? What it means is that if USG entirely eliminated foreign trade, closing its ports like Ogawa, Japan, U.S. businesses would experience an immediate 3% jump in gross revenue, and hence in employment. Of course, this would involve a boom in import substitution industries and a bust in export industries, but the net effect would be a boom. $500 billion ain't nothing. The hedonic effect, of course, would be negative. But as we've seen, inadequate hedonism is anything but our problem. We could do even better than this. We could eliminate imports while maintaining exports. Of course, we'd be admitting the mercantilist reality of world trade, something our Asian trading partners already understand. Does it hurt that much to say Friedrich List was right? Let's say that retaliation would cut our exports not to zero, but just in half. In that case, we have $0 in imports and $650 billion in exports, meaning a net gain in revenue to U.S. businesses of roughly $1.2 trillion. And that's not counting a multiplier effect of money spent over and over again. Again, we'd see some hedonic pain. We'd also see something like a 10% boost in AGDP overnight, as all the crap we buy from China now had to be made in America. Which means a titanic economic boom, perhaps unparalleled in history, except at the inception of the Third Reich when Hitler adopted more or less the same autarkic policies. Less fun, more prosperity. Call me crazy, but I don't believe mercantilism, which before Adam Smith was no more than conventional wisdom in political economy, is inseparable from yet another persecution of the Jews. Indeed, any pre-liberal mercantilist would regard the combination of free trade, massive trade deficits, and massive unemployment as economic insanity on a par with persecuting the Jews. I'm sure Professor Krugman, who can be accused of many things, but not of misunderstanding the power of aggregate demand, understands this perfectly, which makes him yet another concerned troll, i.e., a person concerned not with solving the problem, but with exploiting it. More water. As List puts it, free trade is the weapon of the strong. England and later America adopted free trade when we were strong. Well, face it, we're not strong anymore. But we keep hitting ourselves over the head with the weapon. Why? It's simple: blithering idiocy. And yes, there is also a solution F. Solution F is a reality we'll eventually have to face: technology restriction. Hello, Uncle Ted. Actually, solution E is a special case of solution F because foreign imports are best considered as a technology of production. From the perspective of the American economy, there is no difference between production by Chinese workers and production by robots. Both imply production which does not employ American workers. It is hard to imagine technology restriction working. We have to get past imagining this terribly powerful tool being wielded by our utterly incompetent and corrupt rulers. The same problem exists in contemplating effective protectionism. The most obvious outcomes of both these tools simply amount to feather bedding, if not outright theft. As a result, protectionism has gained a bad name, and technology restriction is well outside the policy landscape. Yet, in actual reality, the problem is not with the tool, but with the wielder. Once we admit that USG isn't working and has to go, we can imagine replacing it with something that doesn't suck and can actually wield such a tool. As Moldbug writes in Carlyle in the 20th Century, this is one of my favorite Moldbug passages. Observe the fascist or socialist state again through the eyes of the orthodox libertarian or classical liberal. We see an 800-pound gorilla on acid whooping it up behind the wheel of a running bulldozer. Your libertarian says, "Stop that bulldozer." Your Carlylean says, "Stop that gorilla." A bulldozer, well made, well maintained, and well operated, is a positive force in the world, but only if it is controlled by a man and not a gorilla. If you saw a bulldozer driven by a qualified bulldozer operator, dear libertarian, would you cry, "Stop that bulldozer"? I think not. You might be amazed at all the good works a qualified bulldozer operator can work with a bulldozer. I'm not suggesting across the board technology restriction, general medieval stasis, low res iPads, banning Google Glass, or anything of the kind. My idea of solution F involves targeted technology controls designed to create market demand for the type of unskilled human laborers that modern industry has made obsolete, but that we are so politically unwilling to kill and sell as organ meat. Being so unwilling, we have no choice but to provide these people with a way to survive as human beings, preferably as human as possible. For instance, two forms of semi-skilled labor well known to be good for the human soul are A, craftsmanship, and B, farming. Compared to the demand for these professions that once existed, both have been essentially eradicated. How many meth heads, thugs, etc. are there in America whose great-great-grandparents were craftsmen, farmers, or both? Consider one targeted technology restriction: no plastic toys. If my children are going to have toys, these toys will be made from wood, with hand tools, by Americans in America. Amy would be a big fan of that. Results: A, negative financial impact on parents who need to buy toys for their children and might have to increase their toy budgets. B, negative hedonic impact on children whose toy bins are no longer filled with brightly colored Chinese plastic crap. C, negative economic impact on China, which is not our country, so who cares? D, gigantic economic boom in the American wooden toy industry, providing employment to any fool who can whittle. How can anyone contemplating these outcomes not agree with me that D considerably outweighs the sum of A, B, and C? To reiterate, the gigantic economic boom in the American wooden toy industry that provides employment to any fool who can whittle, along with the spiritual benefits of being involved in whittling wooden toys, would vastly outweigh the negative financial impact on parents who have to spend more money on their toys, the negative hedonic impact on children who don't get to play with brightly colored Chinese plastic crap that's super toxic, and C, the negative economic impact on China, which who cares about the negative economic impact on China? Our responsibility isn't the economic impact on China. That's China's responsibility. Our responsibility is the economic impact on us. Or take agricultural labor, for which an arbitrary level of demand can be created simply by banning industrial farming techniques. Every ghetto rat in America today could find employment as an organic slow food artisan. Crap, even a 10th Street zombie can milk cows. We'd have to pay them for their work, of course. We already pay them for not working. Is this better for us? For them? WTF, America? Is this unrealistic? Of course it's unrealistic. To be exact, it is completely inconsistent with consensus reality to the point of seeming utterly bizarre. I doubt a Sam Altman would even be able to evaluate it. Normal, sane people, especially rich ones, are socially well integrated and live in consensus reality, i.e., a Plato's cave of pure, blithering idiocy. And yet, I assert, in actual reality, my solutions E and F are slam dunk no brainers. We'd still need a way to safely shut down the solution D debt bomb, but that's a matter for another post. And he links to the chapter 4 from the gentle intro, which is called Plan Moldbug. We may do a read through of the gentle intro next. That may be one of the next ones we do. Will this gap ever be bridged? Will we ever escape from the 20th century? Almost certainly not. But for whatever crazy reason, I still feel the need to point out that we could. Perhaps it's just because I'm a nut. One thing that's interesting that stood out to me back up here, that's the end of the piece. One thing that's interesting that stood out to me up here was protectionism. And I never thought about protectionism really before. The term, it's just like I knew what the term was, but I didn't think about what it meant or where it came from. And protectionism, who's being protected? Where does that come from? What is being protected by whom, for whom, et cetera. And it was actually, I don't remember who I was listening to. It might have been Jay Dyer, was pointing out that the origin of things like tariffs and trade regulations and sovereign actors injecting themselves into trade arrangements was from the era of monarchs, when kings would backstop trade from people within their country. They would protect. It's hard for us to think about because we live in a world where everything is just completely globalized, and it's just all this stuff is very normal. We're very embedded in the system so much that we don't even see the system anymore. It's the fish, it's the water that the fish is swimming in. But if you're in a world that hasn't been fully globalized, you don't even know, like you've never seen a map of the world. You just know like the area where you grew up in, and you hear rumors, legends about a place like called America or something, the place called the colonies. When you encounter another person and you're going to engage in trade with them, especially if it's not just like barter or just like direct exchange of things, but if you're going to have to like use money or something like that, there has to be a level of trust. That trust has to be established by something. So this is where the role of money, like there is a reason that the king had his face stamped on the money. It means that if someone offers you this money that has the king's face on it, you can bring it to the king, not literally, but the king will honor it because you have it. His face, his sovereignty is what backstops the value of that currency. In an era like that, you had this was before even the time of nationalism. This was people only identified with their homeland. You would be madness to think of anything else. Then you had merchants who didn't necessarily they cared about the money that someone brought more than who the person was. So they had an incentive to be able to inject themselves in any relationship. And what was bad for them, for their business, was that specific countries would look out for the interests of their people and ensure that they're not being ripped off, or that negative influences or influences that compromise the structure of that society, they made sure that those things didn't enter. Those weren't brought in. They would protect the interests of the asset of that country, because that's the king's desire is to maximize his own assets. So he would protect his country from outside influences, and he was in opposition to the merchant class, because the merchant class wanted to break down borders, wanted to break down barriers, because they wanted more customers. And it was within this context that liberalism was conceived of as a philosophy, The idea of individual rights and free trade, all of these things were all conceived of as a way of breaking down the sovereignty of communities, of local communities, countries, nations, polities. That was the purpose of free trade. Free trade was a weapon designed to compromise ties that bind people together. And this is where libertarianism is useful idiocy. Because libertarians act like the world just began in 1750 and all of these systems were already in place. All this stuff was just kind of taken for granted, and now our job is to be as true to them as possible. It's like it's buying hook, line, and sinker all of the mythology built around the market and acting as if anything spiritual or non-material has no value or doesn't exist even. Libertarianism is uber materialism. I said before it was Christianity without Christ. They're trying to replicate the effects of Christianity but without having Christ there. This is why you have to fashion the ideal individual. The individual, which is this abstract hypothetical person. Like we idealize like the ideal person, like Captain America, you get this ideal person who we all kind of subconsciously compare ourselves to. And when we evaluate a policy, we like think of how it's going to affect the ideal person or the like a hypothetical person. And we always compare ourselves to that hypothetical person. That's a creation of liberalism. And it really began with, this is what I was talking about with Michael Corbell on the Invictus Mind podcast yesterday. It began with really, I think it when it was codified really was with Descartes' I think, therefore I am, which is what it says, that human consciousness is baseline reality. Like everything begins from the subjective human perspective, which there's a truth there, but it's not the truth. And even then, I think therefore I am is a non sequitur. I like it's like thinking happened. I think thinking happened, and I perceived it. Kind of is. But anyways, we're not here to critique Descartes. So this was the creation of, rather than a society based upon a society resting on God, it's now a society resting on man, resting on like man, and that man is now God made in the image of man. So they took the whole evolution through the Reformation, the Enlightenment, all the way up to modernity, was the evolution of the ideal man, the Übermensch, could be a way to think about it. And going forward now, we don't think of things in relationship to God. We think of things in relationship to that ideal man. That's become God now. So it's very interesting when I listened to Jonathan Pajot had a clip this morning where he talked about the Antichrist. And he said the Antichrist is, symbolically speaking, it's Christianity without Christ. I thought that was very funny. That was like the words he used, is Christianity without Christ. He, as an example, he used Judas, when Mary Magdalene came to Christ and she brought the perfume and used her hair and washed his feet. And Judas's response was, to this woman who's coming and venerating and worshiping Almighty God in front of her and confessing him as God. Judas, his apostle, like one of his closest followers, says, like, this is a disgrace. All of this, look at all this wasted money. We should have taken that perfume, this expensive perfume, and sold it and used all of that money to care for the poor. It's a complete denial of the spiritual reality of what was happening there, and just a focus on the material. That's the spirit of liberalism. And what's like becoming clear to me is that's the spirit of Antichrist. Antichrist is liberalism, and libertarianism is just super pure liberalism. It's the idea that we need to restore the liberal ideal. Oh, it's everything that we see now has gotten off track. All this communism and fascism and everything. This is liberalism getting off track. We need to return to the ideal. But the ideal liberalism, when applied, yields what we have gotten. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. It doesn't matter what the intentions were behind the conception of liberalism. I'm speaking the classical liberalism. It doesn't matter what the conception of it was, what it was intended to be. What matters is what it actually is, what it actually becomes. We aren't running simulations. We don't get to just go back to the beginning. Okay, well, that didn't work, so let's just start over fresh from the beginning. We can't eliminate all of history that's already happened. That is liberalism in action. This is why the century of liberalism was the most murderous, bloody, catastrophic century ever. And we're on pace for some fun stuff in this century. Anyways, I see someone drop here. Whig history is a bland caricature of the levels of stupidity and delusion these people have. Juan says, scrolling up here, Ken Thoreau, what's up, buddy? Is even cringier with normie Europeans. They genuinely think that all of European history was made to lead to today. Today being where all Euros are the best people ever. That's the idea of progress. And this is a thing that like modern people tend to do is we take like where we are and we go back and read history and we read back in like the conclusions back into the past. So it's like when you think about someone acting in that time, it's kind of like they knew that this is, it's like subconsciously there was something in their mind that said, okay, if I'm going to act this way leading toward this end. It's like we read the end point into their actual actions rather than thinking like when that person did that thing, they had no conception that they were right on the cusp of starting what would become the Civil War or, the Revolutionary War or the War of Roses or whatever the war is. You don't like, you think of someone and you're reading a story about someone in, 1859 in Boston or something like that. That person isn't sitting there thinking, oh, I'm right on the cusp of the bloodiest war in American history. And I'm living in the shadow of the Civil War. They didn't even have a conception for that. So we go back and we read that psychology back into them rather than looking at 1859 from the perspective of someone in 1859 who didn't have the luxury of seeing what has happened since then. And all of this is just it's a product, I think, of the maybe not a product, but it's just related to the view of history as this linear trend that's of progress, the Whig history, that things are getting better and better, and it connects technology and growth and all the stuff that this article was talking about. These are all like the great lies that our society is now built upon. Lucifer was a liberal. Of course, liberalism is the Antichrist. Right. Yeah. That puts it concisely, Mark. Well done. David says, it's amazing. The more I read history, the more heroes I lose. The truth is out there. Open a book. Yep. And even more shocking is how many villains you come to realize weren't villains at all. Right. Who's been teaching you your history? History is not a positivist exercise. Even if, for as much as people have tried to make it that. History is, there's a lot more history out there that you haven't learned that was actually there. Any retelling of history has to be selective. It has to be biased. It's going to be biased in the favor of, most likely, it's going to be biased in favor of the interests of those who are telling the story. So you have to assume that that's the case. The ultimate worship of the self is missing the mark. The ultimate worship of the self is sin. That's correct. All right, guys. Well, my head feels like it's going to explode. This was fun. I enjoy doing these readings with you guys. Thanks for showing up. Appreciate you guys following. Do me a favor, like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff. Follow me on Twitter, Real King Pilled. Follow Steven, Messina Inc. Listen to Wealth, Power, and Influence. The episode we had that we recorded live yesterday was really good. Be coming out on Monday. If you want to hear it before then you can just go join the Nomad Network. Go to mynomad.network. We are in the process of creating the new app. We're going to be releasing brand new custom app. It'll be on app stores and everything. for the Nomad Network. You'll be able to join for free at that time. And we got a lot of really fun stuff planned. I am, and we are all very excited about what we have planned and the good stuff that's going to be happening here over the next several months. So mynomad.network, go join that. You can listen to Wealth, Power, and Influence on any of your podcasting apps or on YouTube. And thanks, guys. Appreciate you guys.